quick. There we go. Welcome and good evening. It is an exciting day, and we have someone else here to speak. Yes, hello. All right. So books. We were talking about like the new Gatina book is coming out. I have already forgotten the release date. I'm terrible at these. I am so sorry. Tuesday. Oh, exciting. Looking forward to it. Like, I know it's around the corner, but I never do remember dates. Names are not any better. Faces, though. I got faces.
We've been doing the countdown now for over a month, dude.
Oh, that was for the previous one. I was there for that countdown.
No, we're doing one this time, too.
What? Where?
1 week.
Am I missing this?
Yes, you are.
Dang it. I'm a terrible mage lord.
I think it's in the slush pile, but let me look. I forget which one I posted in.
Well, either way. Hello, Madeline.
Oh, it's in Drowned Dragon.
Aha. Well, I'll go look later.
Hello, Minolin. Are you here? Can you hear us?
Do we have a secret person today? Is that what's going on here? Or just someone who has the name Madeline?
Yeah, he's Secret Squirrel from the old TV show.
Well, either way.
This is an open forum on
Yes.
all things Minolin, everything Spellmonger. The only limits on question is we will not talk about future plot developments beyond just, gee whizzing.
Hello?
Hello. There we go, Dave. Sorry about that, Dave.
Good evening.
So we can't discuss the idea of magical nukes? That's not allowed? Aww.
Welcome everyone to the most epic Mongerverse.
Oh, do we think that it's possible that the military installation located in the Jevelar has a nuclear missile in it? Okay, I'll stop.
Heavy question.
I think it's a radio telemetry and communications bunker. Of the military, that can talk to probably Serenity. Most likely, if anybody can get to the moon station, and maybe the New Horizon. You know?
Interesting.
But you gotta get it.
I feel like I walked into the middle of a very heavy conversation there. I don't know.
No, we were saying that we shouldn't be speculating.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have any topics they would like to see discussed, or are we just gonna wing it here? Because I want to talk about pirates. I gotta be honest. I'm doing pirate things for my D&D group. I got pirates on the brain. I have Master Sensidat being a thing.
Let's do a plug for Baltimore. So
That's true.
Put up your hand. We'll promote you up onto the stage.
That is correct.
So that you may ask a question, or make a comment, or have an observation, and we'll kick it around some.
I also do have the last 3 currently being uploaded to YouTube because I forgot to do that for a while. I apologize. They'll be up there tonight.
Judge you?
No, don't judge me. Oh, my feelings. They're hurt. Welcome, Wittix.
Hello, Wittix. You need to unmute.
Are they moving Wittershins to the party? What's going on?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Hey, I had a question about the new portals. Are you not planning to tax the commerce coming to and from that?
Wait. Can I just? Are we fully doing spoilers? Has everyone had enough time with Mad Mage now?
That's a good question. How do we feel about spoilers? Yes or no? Let's just get a vote from the Mage Lords here. How do we feel about timing compared to the last side story?
Is there anybody here who has not read?
Yeah.
Is there anybody who has not read Mad Mage?
I wouldn't say shame.
I'm ringing the bell.
No, don't ring the bell. No.
Shame. But yeah, the portals and tap.
All right. Hold up before we answer, because we don't speculate too much here. So again, Turl, Dave, how do you feel about spoilers? Are we too soon, or are we good?
No, totally good.
We're totally good here.
Okay, then they outvoted me. So yeah, we're good. Yeah, I think that the idea of them, based off how he's using them in the book so far, it sounds like they're trying to find end runs around the current administrative taxing. So we don't need to tax for every lordling and route possessed by everyone in the meantime. So I think they are trying to find ways around the tax. I don't know if Terry's going to do anything with that, but...
well, it's going to work just like the Mage Mercantile system.
Well,
Like,
Mhm.
you know, I don't think they're going to pay taxes, and I don't think they're going to hopefully get noticed by anybody how much stuff they're sneaking into the different cities. Although you know eventually they're going to get caught.
Oh, they're definitely going to get caught.
The barons and counts are going to get mad.
It does sound
because they
like,
lost a lot of money.
for the Mage Mercantile, they are moving...
Let's put it
Oh.
back to Willett. What do you think, Luke?
I just am excited about the opportunities of what that's going to open up for connecting all of the capital cities and stuff. I think it's going to be a really neat development.
Yeah.
Yep.
My only concern is how long till they get... I know that the Mage Mercantile is shipping small amounts of the things that they're selling and then just lying about how much they have, kind of thing. Where they're like, oh, we haven't run out yet. Yeah.
Got the green book, the red book, and the blue book. I think.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. I don't know if they have the colors, though. That's not a detail I remember.
I'm worried about the economy for all of the places that aren't going to be connected. I guess that's the main reason I was asking.
Mm-hmm. You know...
I appreciate the comments.
The places they picked are pubs. So if you can get, we'll go back to the original, you could get the cheese out of Beauval somehow to Entramar, and then distribute it amongst all the different towns and villages, it'd be a lot cheaper, and a lot more people would have access to it, versus trucking it from way up north to Mageland and paying all the tolls and fees all the way through the entire country until you get to the village.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah, but the major issue there with that is that for like 300, 400 years, people have been relying on these tools and fields, and
Yeah.
entire economies are built up around.
And then shifting those based off of wars along the boundaries, yeah.
But it made
Absolutely
some
did.
things so expensive that nobody could buy
But
them.
Mm-hmm.
it's not. I disagree. You could still get Bavari cheese in a Notramon.
Can we talk about the one weakness to this system, though? Everything is reliant on Sevendor staying safe. And we know that's a target for Korbal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after the crazy magic, might be a target.
Yeah.
For the bundle, too.
People now.
So, well, you know, I agree. And if we have the central point, keeping everything together, being under attack, how do we feel that's going to end up? Like, the taxes are going to be, hey, we need to charge for Sevendor's security now. That's what the tax is going to be.
Well, isn't that what Min's basically getting is the martial arcane? He worked a budget out of the
That's true.
count, all the different counts to support his projects.
I like his statement. He is all of my taxes. You get paid, overpaid in taxes. Boom.
So he's
Alright.
getting money for that.
Yeah. But the problem is the counts aren't getting the taxes for the stuff being transported now. So he's
And-
going to
and
screw
if
himself
they-
here a little bit.
Well, if they investigate, I think a whole can of worms is open because they're going to find out that
Mhm.
the Mage Mercantile system has been gypping them all along.
Mm-hmm. Oh, looks like Midland's trying to work out with his mic system. I'm not sure what's going on there. So yeah, do we have anyone else with questions of things they want to talk about in the recent book or what they hope to see? Toaster. Invite to speak, Toaster. Please come ask your questions.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Hey.
Yes.
Now, good.
In fact, I'm going to cut you down a little bit from my end, but yes.
Gotcha. Okay. So I've just recently read through the last of the books that are currently available, and so I've gone back to the beginnings, back to the basics, and I've started over on book one again, and I'm coming across some stuff that I feel like I haven't seen in ages.
I know that
So
feeling.
I went to Facebook and I asked them about the black stones, the goblin stones, as they're referred to.
Right.
On Facebook. Unofficial answers.
Yeah, yeah. So I was asking around there, and people were like, yeah, they're used later on to sort of like further project that whole sphere of influence and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they vibrated and it kind of responded to Minolin using his witchstone. But I don't know what the original purpose for them was. Like, how did they get there to begin with? Where did they come from? Were they put there?
Well, I think yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think one of the things is when the cave of, someone correct me on the cave name. Hammer.
Oh, no, Kamaclavin's the king. Crap.
The cave under the castle.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cave under the castle. But wasn't it originally?
Where's my book?
Hands for a long time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna grab my book.
And then so there would have been like a whole period where, the Gavani ruled that whole area, and set up these, stones of power that resonated with the magic that they could cast through the Moloch. So I think it was probably set out, built, way into antiquity when the
Yeah,
goblins
they're like all
ruled
done
that
at the
whole
same
area.
time. Yeah.
Oh wow!
Oh, hello.
This is Terry. I finally got. I tried to break in a new microphone and it did not work out. So I'm back to my original, just basic laptop mic, and I apologize for that. But Toaster, your question is well taken, and we'll be exploring this in a minor way, but in a future book. But the backstory to the Goblin Stones, it is, and Dave was on the nose with this. Basically, during about 100-year period where the Gurvani had recently, or at least the Gurvani rebels had broken away from the Alcalan after they got tired of being pawns in their various wars. They had enough magical knowledge to first of all use the Molopar in a very elementary way, but also be able to harvest some of the, I guess you could call it lower grade magical limestone that was in and around the Minden foothills. And their purpose for that originally was to provide kind of an early warning network, a defense network against any reprisals or retributions from the various Alcalan factions. And then over time, they got a little more sophisticated with it and realized that it had more use than just that. But because their lifespans are so short and their institutions were so weak, a lot of the knowledge about how to use those higher functions got lost by the time the Goblin Wars between the Ruler Lords and the Gurvani started. Yeah. So they've basically been sitting there dormant until the Gurvani shamans, with a little enshadowed assistance, were able to reutilize them and repurpose them for something a little more sinister. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so cool. Though it actually sounds like the Gurvani, similar sort of parallels to humanity, saw a loss in either, in their case, magical progression versus humanity's technological progression. It sounds like they both had similar losses of like relative technology.
Right, that's true. Except in the Gurvani's case, they they were essentially forbidden from using higher magic when they were servants of
Over
the
time.
alcohol. And the Enshadowed preyed upon that resentment that they had in order to recruit them. At that point, the Alkalon had basically written off the rebel Gravani as just um, they went their own way and they can live in their stupid caves and we don't care. They'll die out
Yeah.
eventually. And it took the intervention of the Enshadowed to exploit the Gravani's resentment, and then the Enshadowed also steered um, the way that the Gravani developed and that post Goblin War period.
Yeah.
And so they started out with a certain amount of knowledge that they had taken from the Alkalon about magic, but because, like humanity, only a certain percentage of their people were magically gifted, and those institutions were so weak. I mean, when you're talking about a tribal existence, literally 2, 3 generations, and your entire culture can change, and you don't realize it because you just don't have any history to speak of with an oral history that you can
Hmm.
rely on. So yeah, the Enshadowed saw an opportunity and exploited it. The Gravani just basically keep getting abused over and over and over by pretty much everyone around them, and someday it's really going to come back and bite some people. I'll just leave it at that.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'll go ahead and step off my soapbox now and give somebody else an opportunity. But
Okay.
thanks for everything, guys.
Can we go back to Wittix
Thanks for having
since you're here, Terry? He was asking, do you have plans to talk about the tax situation, how Midland and everyone is avoiding it through the portals?
Wizards Mercantile.
No, the portal
Well,
specifically.
of course, and right, and I was listening to that while I was struggling with my microphone. And,
Mm-hmm.
it is an essential hallmark of epic high fantasy to discuss progressive taxation. I think it's fair to say that yes, that will come up, but it's not going to be as, I guess, straightforward as everybody imagines or everybody expects. Um, I don't want to give away too much, but yeah, it does change the basic tax situation and actually suppresses trade in some important ways while expanding some other trade in other ways. And there's going to have to be a reckoning, um, especially as Finland is forced to get more involved with kingdom level politics and the problems of making and fulfilling a budget. Um, there are plenty of people who are making money on the Wizard side right now because of the Wizards Mercantile and now the portals. But it won't take long, believe me. And this is particularly poignant for me because for the last 2 weeks or so, I've been going back through my own tax situation, which is just crazy with international royalties and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So I'm very appreciative of the entire tax issue. Um, and looking back on historical medieval documents, that sort of taxation, it did constrain trade, but it also filled a lot of coffers for a lot of people. And every time there was a dramatic change or even a minor change, putting in a new road or highway or a canal or having a new trade route open up between distant regions, that dramatically affected how local revenues were made and collected. And so, trying to avoid those revenues is one of the strong currents that runs through a lot of medieval history once you get past the kings and the wars and stuff like that and burrow down a little bit. So it's an important subject, and I do plan on tackling it at length. And it will change over time too as the kingdom changes, which it probably will.
Terry, you going to announce about Baltimore?
I can certainly confirm Baltimore. I'm waiting to hear back from two different hotels about the meet and greet and what time we can do it on which day. I'll be putting out a newsletter release about that as soon as I get confirmation from one of them. Um, but at this point, I plan on being in Baltimore at the Baltimore Comic Con at the end of the month, the weekend before Halloween, and I should be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Um, and I will have books to be autographed. I should have T-shirts. Um, Baltimore is one of my favorite cons to do because it's not one of the major ones like Dragon Con or New York or San Diego. And there's kind of you get to meet the mainstream fan a little more there, and just walking around and seeing who shows up to kind of a mid-tier con, it informs me about where everybody's expectations for entertainment are leading. I have gotten a lot of inspiration, and actually have gotten a couple of my artists from Baltimore. So it's one of my favorite cons. I've been going probably to that one more consistently than even Charlotte, which is closer. And part of it is because when I started doing that back before Spellmonger was really the focus of my con attendance, that was the big weekend where all the dudes went away without their wives and you know, partied a little bit, and so I really have a strong fondness for Baltimore. Both my sons will be there. Lance of Boone will be there.
Oh wow! Cool.
Yeah, he's my business partner in our little art gallery and frame shop in Hillsborough, and he's this time for the first time he's coming along to help me as opposed to the other way around. So
Wow.
this will be interesting from that perspective.
Hmm. I had hoped to be there. I will not be available. My wife is dragging me to another sales day elsewhere, so I'll be in Richmond.
No worries.
I feel bad.
Well,
Yeah.
I had a question as well. I had a question. So we've got 7 days. So this time next week, Shadow Heist is gonna be released. It's gonna hit. My question is, from the work with Emily, do you have highlight or one of the things you're most excited about Shadow Heist? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm excited about Shadow Heist. The first book in the trilogy, I was a little nervous about because it was the first time I was collaborating with someone directly on you know, a serious work, and we hit a lot of different stumbling blocks along the way, as you do. But I've worked with Emily for many, many years. She's an old family friend. She's one. My wife has known her since she was 13. I went to her wedding. You know, we're real close, and we were able to easily overcome all the usual things that might terminate a relationship between relative strangers. So, and she's got a great sense of humor. The biggest issue, believe it or not, is the fact that she's not a huge fan of epic fantasy. Even after editing all of the Spellmonger works for all these years, she's been a little hesitant about diving into the genre as such, and so she's had to rely on my expertise and my understanding of the genre in order to be able to work well with me. On the other hand, she's got a great eye for character, and I think that was one of the things that really helped flesh out the first book as we were getting Gatina started, and she really comes into her own a little bit in Shadow Heist. A couple of, I'm sure a lot of you have already gone and listened to the first chapter that Podium so graciously offered for everyone. I'm hoping, I haven't been able to scan all the way through it myself because of see the aforementioned tax crawl. But I believe some of the pronunciation issues were worked out. In terms of the overall book, I'm pretty happy with it. just from the sense that this is if we saw Gatina learn how to survive in the first novel, in the second one, she kind of delves into more of an adolescent bout of inquiry. I like doing my trilogies, especially my young adult trilogies, from the I guess the Douglas Adams perspective of survival, inquiry, and sophistication. So by the third book, we'll see Gatina a lot more fleshed out and a lot more sure of herself as she gets more sophisticated in her art. In Shadow Heist, she's inquiring into everything from the morality and ethics of what she and her family are doing, to the inquiry, basic existential inquiry I think every adolescent encounters when they realize that the universe is so much larger than they thought, that they had imagined. And particularly with the backdrop of the Saganite order, and her explorations there, I think that gives it. There are a couple of scenes that are particularly in depth when it comes to how a young person responds to the meaning or meaninglessness of existence, and the unsatisfactory answers that adults have for them. And I think all of that shapes your character as you grow. And I think we get to see a little bit of that from Gatina. And you know, she's still a work in progress, certainly, but she at least starts asking some of the right questions I think that all of us when we were, 10 to 14 asked, and then after that puberty really sets in and screws all that up. So
Speaking of which, when is this going to plug back into the main line and we get to see Ron and Katina meet through Katina's eyes?
That has been a question.
Well, and I won't answer this much, and this is going to be a disappointment to some of y'all. Although I may put in an epilogue to handle it, but our original outline basically had the trilogy stop just as they are announcing that they're going to be going to steal the chalice that Ouroboros.
Yeah.
So this will take us right up to before she meets Ron. Now, that being said, I may throw in a little epilogue about her seeing Ron for the first time, just to kind of check that box and complete that circle. But we're going to be seeing a lot more Ron and Gatina in the future, as well as some Tyndall and his new babe. The whole character set kind of follows an arc of the natural progression and development of people as we get older, fall in love, mate, hook up, have problems, and then how do you incorporate your significant other in with your local friend group, to put it in kind of sterile parlance, but we'll still be seeing. I'm not killing Gatina off anytime soon. I've invested too much at this point.
A little bit of put armor there.
Back with the Dara book, when we saw the wizard's trial from her point of view, and compared it to what Minilan said. They were almost two different events, listening to the 2 points of view.
Right, and I love doing that because, and I guess it's kind of the Irish in me, but you can tell a lot about a situation by the perspective through which you're viewing it. And without going all Ulysses, I wanted to at least explore the fact that, one man's heroic wizard is another man's evil wizard. So, and there are nuances to all of this. We still don't meet any of the characters from the main series in Shadow Heist. We do see a lot more about Gatina's extended family. For those who are interested, there is a LGBT character that I bring to the fore.
Ooh.
And I'm pretty happy, thanks to my beta readers, for giving me some validation on that. That I handled it in a thoughtful way, and that it's going to be entertaining. The character is actually based on someone I know, so it's particularly entertaining.
Do they know? Do they know you based the character on them yet?
Not yet, not yet. And this is another.
Uh-oh.
This is another old and dear friend, one of my wife's former roommates, who was actually there the night we met.
Wow.
So it's kind of a homage and a full circle. But he is one of my dear friends, and I'm kind of waiting till we get to the end of the series, and then I'll present the entire trilogy to him at once.
Yeah. Wow.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? We accept if you raise your
Any
hand.
other questions about Shadow Heist? Again, I'm very excited.
Yeah. Let's do a quick housekeeping. So I think we've got now a record number of attendees for one of these conclaves. This is the first time we've way past 40. So welcome everybody. If you do want to ask the Spellmonger a question, please do put your hand up.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're going to dominate the chat and ask all the questions we want answers to.
We have
So,
someone joining right now with one.
Hey, all.
Hello,
Thanks
Briz.
for having me. I do want to ask, are we going to hear tales and rumors floating down from Castel in the northern Alshire region into Katina's stories, or?
Yes,
Ooh.
actually, that's a very good question. We will still hear rumors of the Spellmonger from afar, and evil King Rard, and how he has terribly kidnapped Angwin, and we're going to see the struggle for Angwin's restoration from the Alshari side. Specifically the Coast Lord families that are clandestinely trying to start a revolution in order to get him back. And from their perspective at this point in the story, things look pretty bad. Vicatral is firmly in control. He's expanding his control. He has recruited all of the censors that have gotten kicked out of Castal, and even Remir. They're coming up with a functional alliance in order to maintain each other's power. So, from Gatina's family's perspective, things are looking pretty dire at this point.
Wow.
That sounds like it's going to be epic. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Not a problem. Yeah, I'm trying to keep it light on making the Spellmonger the most important thing from Gatina's perspective at this point, because I don't want to diminish the kind of the change in the plot line when she meets Rondel and kind of sees everything from an entirely different perspective at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Quick question about the upcoming story. Will Gatina's family have any deeper ties to the larger world? Like the world that we're seeing with the other kingdoms that aren't connected to Calador, or not Calador, all throughout Calador? Like, will she have any connections broader out to kind of parallel the larger world that Minlin's handling?
Yes and no. We won't see it as much in Shadow Heist. We will start to see that a little bit in Shadow Blade, which will be the third book in the trilogy. In Shadow Blade, she will meet some of her more distant cousins, who are essentially Sea Lords, and that will be the focus. But at this point, the five duchies are very insular. The Alshari and the Remirans and the Cormorans are really the only great seafaring powers, as well as the kind of general expatriate sea lords. But no one really goes beyond the Shattered Sea or the Shallow Sea. The Shattered Sea being to the south, and the Shallow Sea being to the east of the continent. So there's really here there be dragons kind of feel to how the people of the Five Duchies see the rest of the world, and this was done, not just to save me the trouble of coming up with a whole bunch of other magical kingdoms all over the place, which I've done, but I wanted to kind of replicate the general ignorance about the rest of the world that the Europeans felt before they mastered deep sea technology. On Calador, deep sea technology is a whole different thing. On Earth, our deepest ocean is 7 miles. On Calador, the shallow sea is 7 miles.
Wow.
And the equatorial oceans reach down to more than 30 miles before the under ocean kicks in, which is kind of a subterranean pocket of incredibly deep pressure. That's where the formless are imprisoned. But because of that, you've got a really powerful, and because there's not a lot blocking the equatorial ocean in terms of landmass, the weather conditions there and the undersea fauna there are just really, really terrifying.
That'll be cool to see in a later story. I'm really looking forward to the larger world and even the undersea world explanation a little bit. I was wondering, because you had mentioned previously that some of the books that maybe had been left behind had like codes in the margins, and then there was a reference to Across the Sea and other family members, and that's what brought me up to it.
Right, and originally Gatina's her essential ancestor was originally from Vor, pretty early on in the conquest. So while they do have some connections with Vor still, it's very tenuous. It's on the other side of the continent, and again, when you're talking about lifespans of 40 years or so, it's
Vor's been quiet so far, so that'll be interesting.
And Vor will essentially continue to be quiet until it's not, that will take a while. Vor's kind of a boring place. It's right on the border with the endless steppes and sandwiched in between an aggressive centralized power and Merwin, and then it backs up against the mountains, but those mountains have a lot of history to them, and every now and then that history leaks out and hits Vor. And so it's been kind of a frontier, but it's also been, at the same time, the forefront for some important developments in magic and enchantment.
So one more quick question, and I don't want to dominate it like they said, but about the library that was in the Tower Arcanum and the theft that happened in the main storyline of the whole, pretty much, library. I know that Gatina's family, and this may not come up because it happened after the arc you were talking about, kept that. Do they have more caches of knowledge like that, like the Tower did, or just curious about that? I mean, what happened to that?
A lot of it was kept, even though it wasn't understood. When you're dealing with a family of thieves, they're essentially pack rats as well, because you always steal more than you think you should. You always end up with leftover loot.
And you never know what's useful.
Market for it, stick it in a hidden storehouse until you do.
And that has amazing implications. Cool.
Oh yes, it does. Yes, it does. And we'll see kind of foreshadowing of that in Shadow Heist, as Gatina comes up and finds a couple of things that she doesn't really see as significant, but the reader will. And I'll leave it at that.
Terry, don't they have a huge library with the Night Father?
Well, let me just say thanks to Spartan as well. Thanks for your question.
Yes, thank you, Spartan.
Yes.
They do, but that's not the only library that they have. Her house actually has several hidden safe houses throughout in Ultramar, and elsewhere, they've stashed an awful lot of loot. A lot of it they don't even understand it or consider it junk or what have you, but they keep it largely because it's part of their legacy.
Anybody else got a question? Put up your hand.
Toaster is back.
Oh, there's a hand. There's a hand. Toaster's back.
Hello, Toaster.
Sorry, not trying to hug the spotlight here too much, but I did
No,
have
you're
another
good,
question.
you're
Kind of looking at the distant future here. So I will say that it's been, like, I found it very wholesome and heartwarming to see, Minolin raise his different children and seeing him take on these apprentices and watching them grow, and I'm loving all of this. And I'm wondering if, like, in the distant future, are we going to see novels maybe dedicated to, like, the legacy of Minolin, like maybe even just a book that surrounds, like, what his children are like way down the line?
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. For one thing, his children as they age, and we'll see this start in a big way in book, let's see, in book 17.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
In this next book, you'll start to see his children emerge as individual characters.
Mm-hmm.
At least his older children. Honestly, kids don't get really interesting from an adult perspective until they hit between 7 and 9 or so. And so I kind of had to wait a little bit to.
Is that from personal experience?
Oh, good God, yes.
I can attest to that as well.
It's not that they're not interesting before that. It's that you can't really pin a kid down before they're
Yeah.
7 to 10 or so. That's when their personality really kick in. They've started to figure out the world enough to have a response to it, and that's kind of what I wanted to capture, especially with this next book. Start to capture. So Minolin's children, some of whom you haven't met yet. There will be some legacy novels that deal with their individual struggles and experiences. Because they're going to go through a lot. When your dad happens to be the most powerful wizard in human history, that leaves you something to live up to or walk away from. And they're
Oh, yeah.
Or will they turn into taverns?
I think it's safe to say that that's probably not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that they're always going to be on the. They're always going to turn out the way that men either wants them to, or expects them to.
What about the missing?
What about what?
The missing.
the missing-
We have like 6
Yeah.
kids we don't know anything about.
Something like that.
He's got a few, and
One of the
yeah,
gods said that
right.
particularly any
Yeah.
matters.
Well, he had
That's assuming they all live.
right, and that's
Slow
the
down.
point. Not all of them did, and not all of them were magically talented. So, but when you're dealing with things like blood coral, genetics becomes very important.
Caesar.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, real quick,
Sure.
where are you gonna be in person? Where can we meet you next? Like, where's
Baltimore is going to be the next place I definitely have on the calendar. After that, I'm kind of, let's see, November's out because I'm going to Disney. Because, damn it, I wrote 15 books in a fantasy series. I was so good at Disney.
Like some of their genre for a brochure.
Yeah.
That was
you
all-
apart?
And then December's off the table, just in the sense that my family does Christmas in a big way. I'm sure with all the Yule references, you'll understand. But starting in January, I will be looking at a number of other opportunities now that the pandemic is essentially behind us. I think we'll be able to do more. Here's my
North
dilemma.
Carolina, right? Like,
Yes, that's correct.
your backyard area. I'm South Carolina. I was just wondering, are you going to do that con again in Charlotte? The big one?
Yes, yes. I will be doing Charlotte because that's a 2.5 hour drive for me. So that's an easy that's low hanging fruit. And I had a really good time this year. I really did. I was shocked at the number of fans that showed up. We sold out of Craig will attest. We sold out of virtually every book that I brought and every T-shirt that I brought. I talked myself hoarse.
You found friends from your childhood.
Yeah, a couple of guys from my scout troop who didn't know I was even going to be there showed up and surprised me, and they were instrumental because they were the guys who introduced me. Not only, they were Boy Scouts, of course, and that's an important thing for my books, but they were also the ones who helped introduce me to Dungeons and Dragons.
So I've got maybe an oddball question for you. Every time we talk about the Snowstone spell and we hear about that, I keep thinking that it's got to be used strategically and tactically. Like there's all those mountains in Alshar where you could like carve a special protected valley if you have the sea folk remove a mountain of snowstone if they make it that. Is that anything like that ever come up in your head?
Oh yeah, certainly. And as a matter of fact, as Menelin figures out the Snowstone spell, where it happens starts to become extremely important, and he starts to fret about this because he's only got so many mountains in Sevendor, and he doesn't want to see all of them taken away. And so that he's plotting for that, or at least that's on his radar.
Because I could see it being like a perfect terraforming way, giant white walls, a protected valley, and all of a sudden you have your own little protected space against everything else.
Yeah, until the bundle come along and take it. And that's going to be an issue of contention moving forward, especially after Martial Arcane. So it's a delicate balance. And when you're dealing with something like human childbirth, there's not a whole lot that you can really nail down and plan for. I've been through 3 of my own, and each of them was a unique and almost random event in a lot of ways. And so trying to plan anything around childbirth is inherently futile.
It does bring up the question, how much snowstone dust do the bundle actually need for the entire planet?
A lot. I'll get into this in more detail in a later book, but basically, snowstone is the first thing that they've encountered in over 100,000 years that has been able to at least partially reverse some of the damage that they had to their golden reefs during their wars with the Formless.
Wow.
And because of that, it's an absolute novelty. But also keep in mind that from the bundle's perspective, they have gotten, this happened like 2 minutes ago. Even though it's been almost a decade for men, from their perspective, this is something that just happened, and so they're still figuring out how it works and how they can use it to best effect. And their appetite for more snowstone is going to increase dramatically.
Okay, go ahead, Briz.
So backtracking a little bit to Min and the medallion and all that, will medallion inherit the position of the Spellmonger when Min finally passes, or is that going to be something else?
Well, you're assuming that Min isn't, going to be immortal at some point, but your question's well taken. At this point, officially, Menalion is the heir to Sevendor, and so that will be his fief if things don't get turned on their head, which they may. But that's the essential plan that Menelin is working with, is that Menalion is going to become the Baron of Sevendor once Min either steps down or dies. His other boy, Isman, is destined to become the Baron of Greenflower at some point, or at least is the heir to Greenflower. His daughters, they'll get married off, is the plan. But but plans don't always work out. So, and especially after book 17, things get a little wonky. So I'll leave it at that.
I can't wait.
Okay. Thank you, Briz. Joshua's next. Hold on.
Oh my goodness, I didn't think I'd do it.
Oh.
Hey Joshua, what you want?
I'm just curious about what the tolerances are for an Ilkdeen steel barrel for a rifle. Those Dradrian.
That's an interesting question. And we will probably be playing around with that a little bit, especially since Ormar the Alchemist eventually reinvented gunpowder. I think that we're also going to see it compared to common war magical spells. And honestly, a rifle, although it's an excellent weapon, is a very kind of limited weapon from a war mage's perspective.
Sure.
It does one thing, pretty much, and it does it really well. But from a war magic perspective, there's a lot more to combat arms than just shooting things and killing them that way. Now, that doesn't mean that firearms won't at some point play a role. As a matter of fact, they already have in a small way. But I don't think we're going to see the wholesale creation and use of small arms like that, or even artillery in the sense that we usually think of it. Because magic is so inherently more powerful than those individual weapon systems.
And that's me thinking on, glyphing a rifle barrel with those Dradrian spells. That opened up my imagination so wide.
Oh yeah, I mean there's a lot of intriguing possibilities there, and I'm not saying we won't be using them at some point, but I don't want to get predictable. With the world as complex as Calador, I don't want to throw our historical solutions to problems and
Thank you very much.
treat that as the only way.
But you
I think
kind of used dropping rocks out of hocksters as your artillery, right?
yeah, that works pretty darn good.
Yep.
As well as the rain of steel and
Yep.
some of the stuff that popped up in Mad Mage and will be popping up in Martial Arcane. There's an infinite variety of magical weaponry out there, and from a war mage's perspective, riflery is just not as effective or sophisticated as some of the stuff.
As a D&D, person, are we expecting any kind of railguns?
Well, there was a question from a long time ago that I'm not sure that quite got answered on the Ghost Rock, which was, if you put something into a Hockster at velocity, when you release it from the Hockster, does it keep that velocity? Or does it lose it?
That's an intriguing question, and the short answer is yes.
Oh.
The problem is trying to capture something in a Hockster that's going at velocity.
Yeah.
Because human reaction time, even magically augmented human reaction time, that would be difficult. Not impossible, but difficult.
Well, that question dealt with somebody getting 100 people together, shooting a volley of arrows to a spot, and then capturing them in flight into a Hockster. And
Right,
they could
right.
Laying them out later on the other side.
Sure. And that's a very intriguing form of magic, and I could see it being done, but the rain of steel is just easier because you're essentially
It's gravity, yeah.
yeah, gravity's great and a bit.
And a bitch, yes.
Go ahead, Philosopher.
Are we gonna see Alia get more of instead of just being like Minolin support through the whole thing, is she gonna get more of being an active piece?
Ooh,
Well, I would argue that being Minolin support has been pretty active. especially after book 13. And let's put it this way: Alia she doesn't have the same ambitions that Grandine and Mardine do. She doesn't necessarily want to rule. Her focus is her family first and foremost, and she truly is in love and devoted to Minnie. That being said, she does take an active role, and you'll see this play out in Martial Arcane. She takes a very active role in protecting Minlin from himself. But she's already a countess when she never wanted to be a lady. So her response to political intrigue and all that is a lot more muted than, say, Pentandra's will be, or Rardine. That being said, Minlin and his situation puts her in a role where she's essentially going to be forced to make some decisions and take charge. She did that with the Greenflower War. But she and Minlin are a team, and she doesn't see her role as his support as a lesser office as much as a great responsibility in and of its own right. But she's a great character. I love her to death. She's partially based on my wife. My wife is like part Pentandra, part Alia, and honestly part Lalassian, which makes my life really interesting.
Oh, I bet.
Did your wife find funny too?
Pardon?
I think he was
Did
saying.
your wife find food funny too?
Yes.
She finds food
Yes.
funny.
Yeah.
Right, and I can't wait to explain that. It'll come that the explanation for that will. But that actually was based on something that my wife said. So in relation,
Awesome.
I'll leave the punchline out. But yeah, we'll explore that at some future date, and it'll hit everybody by surprise, and they too will realize why spoons are coming.
We're going to get rickrolled again.
Mm-hmm.
I can only do that once. I promise you, I will not rickroll again. That's the sort of thing that you can only do once.
Yes, it's a one-off.
I mean, they make it their own song.
Yes, I do have. It's like the side question to go with Alia, and it goes with the bundle. Her being the handmaiden, and how much that has tied her to the bundle.
Yes, and that's an important plot point that it fades from immediate importance as she kind of gets better. She really healed a lot during her time in the Jevlar, and reasserted some essential parts of her own personality. But that connection with the bundle, let's just say that's one of the reasons why spoons are fun. Her connection with the bundle is pretty fundamental to her right now. It's just a kind of a subconscious thing most of the time, until she's confronted with a situation where it comes immediately to the fore, and this will, hilarity will ensue.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I have invited Hated Hillbilly, I think is the name, to speak. I'm not sure why they haven't joined. We're going to be a little bit longer, and then we'll grab Particulon if they're still not in.
Alrighty.
Yeah, spoons. I'm looking forward to this. I thought it was because the whole Vundle thing, because spoons underwater really don't serve much purpose. I'm looking forward to it.
That's part of it, yes.
There we go.
Do you want to go?
Yes.
Nope.
It's probably a very quick one. So I think you mentioned at some point that you were aiming for around for like 30 books for the whole series. I was just wondering if that's still the plan or if anything has changed about that.
The short answer is yes. There will be 30 books in the main series. The longer answer is that there will actually be more than 30 books because at this point I have at least two books that will, and probably more, that are not specifically part of the series, and are kind of one-offs, dealing with different characters, standalone novels, basically. One, and I've discussed this before recently. One will be the resolution of Dara's Dilemma, and will be a straight-up romance novel. Ha 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 ha. And then the other one will be another Rondell and Tyndall book, but it's something I didn't want to include as part of the main series because it happens almost entirely with that. Like Knight's Magi, Minolin is there at the beginning and at the end, but he's more of he's what compels the story, but he's not involved in the story until the very end. Yeah. Beyond that, there are other characters, and I've specifically built this world with enough interesting characters and a broad enough background so that I could see there being, by the time I get to book 30, there could be 30 non-series novels that go along with it. We'll just have to see. And at some point, I do plan on opening up portions of Calidor to other authors and doing some anthologies of short stories with fans and authors who are interested in playing around in the world. Wow. Kind of like Marion Zimmer Bradley did with the Friends of Darkover series. Which was
might go back in time too, though, and have like Lucillian talk about the sinking of Herwin.
Right. That's another standalone that is in the planning stages. Basically, we will. My plan is that we will see Lelastian kind of more in her youth on Perwin, learning about human civilization for the first time, and that will cover the downfall of Perwin as well. But there's more out there. I mean, I can't go to sleep without waking up with another idea.
Well, we're all dying waiting for the Caswallen story.
Well, I know, and I'm working on that. I'm on the Mavone story.
I'm not
right
pushing
now.
you.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. I can't not do the Caswallen story. I need to buy an awful lot more liquor for that. So.
Yeah, he's just pushed out 3 books in like 3 months. So, I think we can chill out.
All right.
So many people have commented on that.
Oh yeah. But this year, I have actually published 4 books in this calendar year, or will have published 4 books in this calendar year. So eat that, George R. R. Martin.
Dang right. Dang, Skippy. So Hillbilly had a question.
We got Hillbilly. Yeah.
Thank you, Particulon.
Hillbilly, you're muted.
Yes.
Yeah, you're on mute. We can't see you. We can't hear you.
We know you're there, reaching out.
There we go.
Uh-oh. We still don't hear anything. Oh no.
It's a mic thing. I had a mic thing.
No.
I have to like
wait,
close on Discord.
so did Minolin.
So I just while we're waiting for Hillbilly to turn off and turn on and come back, can I don't want to hijack this away from Spellmonger, but as a Tolkien fan, can I ask you have you got any thoughts on the recent Rings of Power series? Anything that you want to share?
Okay, and I hate to be this way. I have not watched it on purpose. And my reasons are varied, but they boil down to I'm a Tolkien purist.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that they've done, probably my issues with it run more towards them ignoring the timeline that Tolkien laid out. And I appreciate what they did because of the dramatic interpretation. I get the problems that they had to overcome with telling a story that lasts literally 1,000 years. But that said, I've read so much Tolkien at this point that now that the first season is over, I might get really drunk and watch it, binge watch it. I'm going to have to be really drunk in order to not scream at the screen when they get
Yep.
that little thing wrong. I mean,
My children can't be in the same room with me when I'm watching.
There are so many things wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, stop with me. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I hated the Hobbit series. Oh.
Oof.
Alright.
So, Hillbilly, you there?
Yeah.
Oh.
He ran
Oh.
away.
Alright.
No, I think it's probably resetting. But
Hang on, here we go.
did have
Just
another-
so
we did-
everyone knows, there's a gearbox down in the bottom, and if you click it and go to audio settings, you can change the mic and speaker settings.
And make sure you have the right one.
Yes, make sure the right one.
We did have a question with the resurgence of fantasy streaming shows such as the aforementioned. What medium would you like to see the Spellmonger turned into?
That's a great question, and I'm open to anything, but honestly, I think Spellmonger would be best with an animated series. And I say this just because if we tried to do it with CGI, the production costs would just get so ridiculously expensive. The problem with CGI is that there's when it works really well. When it doesn't work, it really knocks you out of your willing suspension of disbelief. And I think a really beautifully illustrated animated series would be my druthers. But then again, if the check's big enough, they can do it with puppets for all I care.
You know what? I'm for puppets. I like this. It's a great idea. Research into the old medium.
All right, Hillbilly, you there?
Have we got you? Are you online?
Alright,
Oh,
I
Let's
feel
go to the
bad.
next one.
We are going to go to the next one. I'm going to invite Carrot Boy up next. Hillbilly, please put it in the Cheerford In and just type it up. I will happily relay it as soon as it pops in. Thank you.
Hey, Carrot Boy.
Hi, I had two completely unrelated questions. First is, what is the mineral composition of Ghost Rock, and would it be possible to snowstonify it, and what would that one look like?
Ooh.
Good question. Snowstone, as it was initially created, was based on silica, and of which there's an awful lot in igneous rock, which is what the mountain roots of the Uwari Range are made of. Ghost rock is different. Ghost rock is a sedimentary rock. It's a limestone. It's a limestone made out of ancient, a specific type of ancient golden coral that was magical at its inception, and then gets even more magical and kind of twisted into ghost rock over the course of its transformation from coral to limestone. So as such, it's got a lot more calcium in it, less silica, and so there would be an effect if a snowstone spell went off around ghost rock, but it would be a more muted effect. It wouldn't be pure snowstone. Now, what it would be weird, and we may explore that. But just as I spoke about when the question of the constructed intelligences came up and their ability to work in Kalidor's magical field, I pointed out that there was one constructed intelligence that actually was different from all the others, and that's Forseti, because Forseti was in Min's Tower during the Snowstone transformation. And as you might know, silicon, which is an important part of our computer apparatus, has a lot of silica in it, and was thus transformed. So Forseti is technically the only magical constructed intelligence in the world. And I'll leave it at that. So what's your second question?
Yeah, I'm about that. No, the other one was just when Midland started speaking in the Alka-Alan language, like, surely the Alka-Alan would be suspicious as to how he learned it and how he became so fluent in the older dialect, and I was just wondering if there were any immediate consequences from that. Or any
yes,
consequences.
Yes, there are. We will be dealing with some of them in Martial Arcane coming up. But the bigger question for the Alcalan is not how he learned the language, but why does he speak it with an ancient accent? And Midland has done something that no other human has done. He has been exposed to the totality, or at least the majority, of the Alcalan civilization in ways that no other human was able to appreciate. Because of his memories, his new memories, he now has a much greater perspective on the Alcalan through their own eyes, and exposure to parts of their culture that were never really exposed to any other human beings. The Alcalan were on their best behavior when they first met humanity. And they were very careful about which elements of their culture and history that they presented. They basically were on first date behavior. And Midland has gone through now and understands them at a level that no other human does. And it's terrifying to them because there were a lot of secrets that they left out from their conversations with humanity, and now he knows them, or at least knows most of them.
Well, didn't they say they basically gave them their children's books of the history
much.
and stuff?
Well, and not trying to cause any ire for anyone, but it would be as if a modern German met someone who was unfamiliar with their culture for the first time, and when they asked about German culture, there might be parts of it that they would edit out, just to keep from having to explain some really deep and troublesome elements of that culture and history. So, they basically said, we'll start with this and see where it goes, but Midland's seen behind the curtain. In ways that nobody else does, and that gives him a very specific appreciation for just how deep and twisted and elegant and sophisticated they are. But he also recognizes the weaknesses that they haven't been displaying to humanity, and that gives him an edge. And also makes him a target, because there are plenty of things in Alcalan history that they just don't want humanity to know about.
All right, Gopher, I believe, is next.
Hey, thanks. I have a question on novellas. Are you planning or thought about doing any side books on the point of view of like a villain or a less like a shady character like Grandine or the Alcalan?
I have. I've played around with all of those ideas, and while I don't have any specific plot outlines as of yet, or which characters I would do as of yet, for example, someone suggested an Ayugi book, and look at the world through Ayugi's eyes. I've also considered doing a book about someone who's completely non-magical, but gets caught up in the affairs of the world because of magic, but isn't themselves magical. Like I said, I can't wake up without having another brilliant idea about another book to do. And I do write these things down as notes to kind of give them some form and gel, and leave a legacy if I get hit by a bus of additional material that other writers can expand upon in the future. I like the one of my major fantasy influences was the Thieves World anthology, Shared World anthology, and there are so many great shady characters in there. I've only stolen a few of them at this point, but I'm not above stealing others, and there are others. There are also some homegrown characters that I've come up with that I thought, that this person can carry out a novel on their own, or at least a novella. So, excellent question.
Next is DC Tuck.
Hey, how's it going? Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
I had a question that's been on my mind for quite a while. How much longer, or do you have plans what book around would you say we get to learn more about the Iris and their nature as an organization?
Oh, lovely question. It'll be. We will see the Iris mentioned again in book 17. By book 20, we will understand a lot more about the Iris as an organization. And they are a lot more widespread and deeply embedded, not just in the Five Duchies, but elsewhere, than anybody suspects. They're a criminal organization now, but that's not how they started out, and that's not really their sole purpose or even their main focus. It's a means to an end, and they definitely have an end in mind.
Are they leftovers to the Colonial Intelligence Agencies?
I don't want to get into specifics, but let's just say that Iris is probably another acronym.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Would you be running into any of their agents in the Gatina novels at all?
Not in the Gatina novels per se. That's I'm trying to stay local with the Gatina novels, local in terms of Alshar, and because that was such a rich part of the world. I really wanted to explore it a little more in depth on its own without including elements from outside. But as the series goes on, yes, the Iris will become increasingly important.
Okay. Thank you, DC Tech. So I do have Hillbilly's question. I have one from the Cheerford end that someone wanted to ask. So let me get this. So first up, Hillbilly is, as new CIs are introduced and knowledge they contain, will we see magic evolve to match modern physics? Will spells become more devastating as a result? What's going to happen?
That's a good question. And it actually has a couple of different answers. As to the first portion, the CIs are problematic for Milan and the people of Caliber because they were programmed, and they were programmed with very specific means, very specific issues in mind. They have essentially a doctrine that they are trying to see come to pass, and it's not. The original colonial doctrine was not anticipating such a rapid fall from civilization as the human colony did. So they, as useful as they are, they will occasionally be working at cross purposes, not just against Minlin and his organization, but also against each other as we slowly introduce more CIs into the plot. And the second part of the question, remind me again.
I've already moved away from that to the next one. Sorry. Let me go back. Will we see magic evolve to modern physics? Would that be more devastating as a result?
Yes. Devastating is a broad term and a loaded term. I would say we're going to see magic get more sophisticated as it becomes informed by the higher levels of science that the CIs are able to provide. Magic is already, at least the way that I've constructed it, it has, hopefully, from my imperfect understanding of the discipline, it adheres to the quantum physics that we're aware of at this point, with plenty of leeway for me to allow a sophistication to come forward. And when we're dealing with quantum physics, things like dimension and time and these basic things that in our kind of Newtonian conception of the universe we tend to ignore or use as essentially constants, that gets changed around a little bit. And now that Min has um, access to the memories of essentially a quantum physicist and astrophysicist, um, that's going to allow him a level of sophistication in magic that I wouldn't say is devastating, perhaps, as much as allows him a great deal more leeway and as he goes forward. And you know, anybody who read Mad Mage can see the first glimmers of that, but that will get far more developed as we move on in the series. And of course, those memories are, as have been stated, are not forever. And so later on in the series, he will be in a position of using magic that he doesn't truly understand anymore. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Oof. The last one is from JoJo FX, who tried to ask something earlier, but then wasn't able to speak, apparently. With the introduction of Forsaken into the world, will there be efforts made to reintroduce technology into the general population, similar to how they introduced magical revolutions?
There will, but by the time we get to the... I'll give this much away. We will be introduced to the Forsaken kind of gradually. When the first of the Forsaken arrive and become characters within the plot, that's going to be their intention. They're going to see the colony through more modern eyes, or at least more technologically advanced eyes, and think, "Oh my God, what happened?" You know, we already see a little bit of this in Menland's memory, new memories, as he reflects on the colony. When the main body of the Forsaken show up, things will get crazy then, and reestablishing at least some of human technology will be important. But there will be enough other things going on at that point where that will almost be a secondary issue. We like to think that the way that our history and development of technology evolved is you know, of course, the most natural and most logical step. But if you break down how our history happened, and I recommend the old I guess 70s and 80s series Connections, that explored how some of our greatest technological innovations were either accidents or byproducts of other endeavors, to point out that history and development of technology, it doesn't happen as a matter of course. A lot of it is very random, has to do with culture, has to do with warfare, has to do with happenstance, and when you throw magic and other civilizations into the mix, we're not going to get a straight up industrial revolution, nor do I think we would want that if we were ourselves living on Calidor. There's a lot of intriguing and great things about the way that human civilization on Calidor has evolved. And throwing that all away for industrialization, that's got some serious drawbacks, and it's not necessarily in the colony's best interest.
But that's good for the average person, because right now they're totally dependent on the mages to have any kind of advanced civilization.
Well, the question is, why do you want an advanced civilization, and what do you get out of it, you know, as an individual or as a community?
An iPad, an iPhone. Come on.
Well, enchantment.
Sure. You know, those things are great, but you know, you also look at reducing in an industrialized civilization, your family size goes from an average of 6 or 7 children to 2.1.
Yep.
And that's problematic for a lot of people, and dramatically changes the way that your society is.
That's why we have issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of needed her.
Than most people suspect.
Yep.
Garignac is next.
Sure. So mine's kind of in the same line. Is there any intent to explore the interstellar civilization that launched humans to the world and what they've been doing since Perwin and the initial colonization?
Yes, actually, and this will be towards the end of the series that we'll really be looking at that. The I think as we see and explore the New Horizons, when that becomes a factor in the plot, we're going to discover that a lot of our assumptions about the colonial effort and the reasons behind it are faulty. Um, that we don't truly understand the motivation or the goals of the original colony, and that's okay. It will actually be a lot of fun to explore that. But that colony didn't just show up with a quarter of a million human beings and who all had gloriously benign and beneficial ideas about the culture that they were bringing. There's a lot of backstory and history involved in the colonial effort that played a role in Calidor's development as a colony and led in some ways directly to the downfall of Perwin and the collapse of higher human civilization on Calidor.
And speaking on that, we're going to find out what caused them to go so drastically off course.
Yes, we will. Are you speaking of the New Horizons ship, or are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that was a deliberate thing that was done to the New Horizons, and it was done. It was done not by consensus exactly. But there was a period of political turmoil in which it was decided by some people in power that the best way for the human colony to avoid the attention of the bundle, the negative attention of the bundle, was to remove that very powerful piece of leverage from the skies. Now, that being said, not everybody was on board with that. And the reasoning at the time, nor was that reasoning well informed by their good buddies, the alcohol. So there's a lot of intrigue that surrounds both that and the downfall of the constructed intelligences and the sinking of Perwin.
But I was thinking of how they went through the wrong portal and ended up on the far side of the universe.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was actually kind of an accident, sort of. But and we will that will get mentioned again. That'll be more towards the end of the series when we're tying up loose ends. So.
Okay, you don't need to go into it. I just if you're going to cover it, great. That's
Yep.
all I
Moonwalker's next.
So I've been wondering if, with these trilogies and offshoots, are we going to be able to see maybe Adipole in a series in the future in its own, or maybe the Order of Knights of Stasi in their own separate kind of sites and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Adipole is actually one of my favorite characters, just because anybody who has had, and I haven't, but...
and Olmec is the one who survives, so I like that character.
Olmec is one of my favorite characters. He's based on one of my father's best friends, Leon Bedingfield, who was just a huge, giant, red-haired Irishman. Not actually from Ireland, but descended from Irishmen. But just the most gentle, soft-spoken dude you've ever met in your life, and he regularly wandered around barefoot. And loved plants and trees, and so I stole his character for Olmec. But yeah, there will be for Adipole specifically. There will almost certainly be a standalone at some point, whether it's a novella or a novel. I haven't decided yet. But the whole question of who he's going to marry um, it comes to the fore and will probably be the focus of that book.
Okay. I seem to have lost Steel Poppy. Oh, thank you, Moonwalker. I seem to have lost Steel Poppy, so we're going to move on to Connor.
A question. With the Alkaline Council, will you write into it as, will they figure out how badly they've messed up? Their morals and values come into question with them realizing what they've done to Calidor?
Well, here's the thing: the Alkaline Council that Min is dealing with is almost like a provincial government. They are not the ones in charge of all the Alkaline on Calidor. That technically goes back to the three High Kings who live on other continents and who haven't always been a party to the decisions that the local Alkaline Council has made. That said, even amongst the three High Kings and their civilizations, I wouldn't say that they will realize how they messed up specifically, even with the regional council. They wouldn't see it as messing up. They would see it as it seemed like a good idea at the time. And they were really focused on avoiding the attention of the bundle more than anything else. It's not that they're trying to get away from their own system of ethics and morals. It's the problem that our, and I think this is true in any civilization, any culture. Our stated morals and ethics are by their nature idealistic. And once you take ideals and you run them into a practical problem, hilarity ensues. You are going to have to make compromises. You are going to have to do things for political convenience that may violate some terms of your ethics or your stated moral stance. And you know, we can go back in any civilization on Earth and find examples of this where it seemed like a good idea at the time. Or, you know, if we rationalize this enough, then we can kind of fit it in with the pattern and established ethics and morals that we say that we live by. And you know, sure, they know that they messed up. That doesn't mean that they feel guilty about it. And I think only the prospect of being faced with where they messed up is going to cause any kind of deep-seated introspection about their culture. I mean, they could turn it around very easily and point out that the original ethics and morals that the colony, the human colony, presented to them, that you know, they sounded really noble until humanity turned around and basically eschewed them for 700 years after the colonization. So that doesn't mean that they won't have to face some music, but they've got really long lives, and people, you know, kind of forget about things that seem important now after a couple of hundred years. So we're going to see all that play out.
Yeah, that's great. I've got one to jump in with. Sorry to interrupt the lineup, Manji. There's just a comment from Trickstory in the Chief Within, and it says, "Seriously, Terry, I rank you with Tolkien, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Jordan. Your blend of comic whimsy with moments of utter badassery mixed throughout is just perfect for me."
Excellent. I appreciate that. It's funny because Tolkien is certainly one of my larger influences, but I'm also fairly heavily influenced by Heinlein and by Roger Zelazny, and both of them had a certain sense of whimsy in different ways. And basically, I'll steal from any high quality author out there that I like and incorporate that into what I'm doing. I'm just been very fortunate, and I feel very gratified that so many other people have enjoyed what I've been able to steal and cultivate. I'm very excited by the fact that we're only halfway through. There's still a lot of fun stuff to come, and that's another reason for all of the side novels and the trilogies and novellas and such is that I'm having a really good time writing this. And I have yet to run short of ideas. There's so much out there to be stolen yet. I can't wait to do it.
All right, fair. Welcome across. You had a question.
Hi, yes, Terry, big fan. I've been basically listening to you on repeat for a couple of years now. It's a little embarrassing. My question was regarding enneagrammatic magic. Is it something that you have to be born on Calidor in order to have? If you were to bring someone from the New Horizons into the Magosphere, would they have an enneagram, or do you have to be born and raised on Calidor in order to have?
Interesting question. And the quick answer is that yes, people from outside of the Magosphere do present enneagrams because they're basically the magical reflection of our own self-knowledge, our own self-awareness. That's why it's not quite mind reading. When you look at someone's enneagram, it is you're looking at their self-image and in a very complex sort of way. It's kind of like a shadow your soul cast inside the Magosphere. That
Could I?
In a place where there is no magic.
Would you mind if I attempted to clarify that? So you're saying it's like a quantum state for that person?
Yes, but it's one that changes from moment to moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reflection of their mental, emotional self-awareness, and therefore it's based more on sentience than sapience. So that's why just about all living things have enneagrams, and that can be, for example, viewed by Ruderall. But there are differences in scale, of course, and so he doesn't even see the more microscopic sentient creatures and the I guess very complex sentient creatures like the Alcalon or the gods or the Bundle are going to come across in a much different way. But essentially, just because you are outside of the Magosphere doesn't mean that you wouldn't have an enneagram once you came into the Magosphere.
Thank you.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. It's like a magical interface into someone's soul, basically.
Essentially, yes.
Excellent.
Okay. I'll be grabbing Zen Walrus. I might grab Coyote next, just because he keeps disconnecting, I think, or something. He drops off the list. This is like the third time he's joined. I don't know what's going on there.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Hey,
So-
what's up?
Welcome.
Thank you very much. So my question is this. My reading from, I forget her name, but Minlin's new headmate, is it sort of sounds to me like the current Alcalon on Calidor were essentially picked by a bunch of neo-Nazis. So my question is this. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, that's essentially correct, but go ahead.
Alright, so my question is, how much do just the rank and file Alcalon know and or accept this, and how much is this shape their society, whether or not they would like to admit it, is my question.
Okay, that's a somewhat complex question. Um, the original bargain between the Enshadowed and the other Alcalon that they brought with them, the Enshadowed were basically a deeply authoritarian organization that were overtly racist, but they were also highly technically skilled. And even though they were in a minority, when presented with the horrific existential issue of the Dreadstar, they wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. But they realized that they were too small to be able to do that sort of thing on their own. And if they were going to succeed, they would need the assistance of a select group of not terribly objectionable people. And so the people the Alcalon who did accompany the Enshadowed, they had misgivings about it, but then again, their ship was going down, essentially. Their civilization was about to end, and it was a matter of survival. Now, once they successfully made it to Calidor, they almost immediately threw off the yoke of the Enshadowed and established the three High Kings as their governing body. And the Enshadowed are still pissed off about that. The Alcalon as a civilization see that bargain as a necessary evil. And there are elements, especially in the early Alcalon history on Calidor, where they genuinely lament the compromise that they had to make. Towards the end of the series, you'll see that there are certain parallels between that and the human colony, and how it was constituted, formulated, and put forth through the universe. There was infighting amongst the human colonists, just as there were between the various factions of the Alcalon. And in the end, after a struggle, there were compromises made, and people just kind of glossed over it after a while and accepted things for the way they were. You can make analogies to a number of historical events in our own history. The Pilgrims come to mind. Many different colonial efforts actually come to mind. The people who go out into the universe to colonize aren't necessarily the best people, the best examples of the people from the original root world. And that's true in both the human and the Alcalon cases, and the foremost for that matter. The Mexicanza, that's a slightly different story, simply because they have a Gestalt consciousness that gives them a sense of consensus that not even the Alcalon can really appreciate. And so with the Mexicanza, they didn't have factions the way that the other races, even the Bundle, have factions. But the Mexicans have always been very unified because of their Gestalt consciousness. And that has kind of made them the exception.
Okay.
All right.
Coyote is next, and then Poppy will join after that. Thank you, Zen.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
The most recent thing I wanted to ask was about the Enneagrams, and how they relate to a person's shroud.
Excellent question. The shroud is more of a biochemical magnetic or biomagnetic phenomenon that reflects the state of your central nervous system in the moment. The Enneagrams are more psychologically based. They are reflections of thought more than your biomagnetic signature. And I understand that's a subtle distinction to make, but there's important distinctions between the two that in the system of magic. Your shroud will change. Go ahead.
Well, I know that we had the Enneagram from one of the first humans that came to Keldor in the Ghost Rock that was saved. And so that was our first example of an Enneagram that was not from Keldor. And it's just that you've mentioned shrouds previously, like with, I'm not going to remember his name, Hammond maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I've mentioned him a couple of different times, but yeah, I get what you're saying, and I appreciate the distinction. And that's the thing; they're not exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I was just trying to understand the difference.
Okay. Well, your shroud is basically the magically augmented radiation of your central nervous system, meaning that it like Enneagrams, it changes from moment to moment, but it's less based on your self-awareness and more based on your biological shading into magical processes. Shrouds of Rajira, people with Rajira tend to be stronger and more defined because of their Rajira, whereas your Enneagram isn't necessarily going to be any more developed or strong because you are magically talented. Your shroud is basically your aura. If I'm going to get all new agey with it.
That's where I kind of...
Okay, yeah, that's why we're shooting for. So you could have a magical sport who could see shrouds, not just see them. All magically talented people can use mage sight and see shrouds if they get in the right octave. But not all of them can see any of them. So it's more like very few of them can. It's a very lofty, sophisticated, and subtle part of magic. But it's also a very important one. Unlike a shroud, which changes from moment to moment sometimes, your Enneagram is based not just on what's happening to you in the moment, but your entire history as a psychological being, and how that has changed over time and developed over time. So I hope that that might be a little murky, but that's essentially
that explains a lot. Thank you. And then I wanted to ask about, now Minlin had the memory of, I believe she was a spirit singer, who was the one that was able to open the Molopar in order for, the select few that they decided to get the, Hell of Dodge before the Dread Star came. Now, with that, doesn't Minlin actually have a lot more information on the Alka Alone than the actual Alka Alone have currently?
Yes, he does, and that is something that deeply disturbs the Alka Alone, and as they come to realize it will disturb them more and more that he has a more complete understanding of their civilization than they do. And it's something that he's going to be able to turn to at various points in order to take advantage of it. He knows things about them that they don't remember because it happened, 6-10 generations back, and he understands it better than they do. He knows the things that did not survive the colonial transfer from their home world to Calidor. And again, that gives him some advantages, but it also makes him a target.
Okay, and this is kind of an obscure question, and but is there a basis for why the Alpha alone have such a fear of omnipotent beings, such as they took the egg from, they did not return the egg when found uh, to the Vundel, and that is as far as, basically an omnipotent being, and they prevented and manipulated the humans from having a monotheistic god that would manifest. And I understand that there was the mention of, a world creator. If they get pissed and think the best thing to do is to destroy the world, being able to do that. But it seems like perhaps there's more to it than that.
There, kinda, yeah. I mean, the essential response of the Alpha Alon to vastly more powerful beings than themselves is more or less the same as it would be for humanity. Both races are survival oriented, and both are egotistical enough to think that they're terribly important in the universe. And unfortunately, the presence of those kinds of beings undermines that basic egotism that both races enjoy. It's one thing if you're dealing with the Mexicans who are happy little trees, or the Bundle who are safely in the oceans, and at a distance. They're not crowding our own conceptions of how darn important we are. But when you realize that your race is ephemeral, even if you live 2,000 years, and that there are things that live vastly longer and are vastly more powerful, I think it's a natural response, a natural manifestation of our inferiority complex. We don't want to acknowledge that there's something greater out there than we have managed to create and build. And we don't want to acknowledge that those things can wipe us out in an instant, even by accident, without us having any say in it. So I would say that the Alkalan are more sophisticated in how they deal with that. And yeah, once they realized that humanity could produce gods, and they understood our mythology enough to realize that some of our gods were cosmic in nature, and if manifested could literally destroy the world with a thought. They thought that was a step too far, and they took steps to mitigate that.
Thank you for that, Coyote. Steep Poppy is next.
Yes. Good evening. First, when you mention God, that reminds me of something. Won't Menelem become immortal because he's done such great deeds that the echoes of his legendariness will rise him into the divine, in a sense?
Good question, and this has been brought up a couple of different times. And as a matter of fact, I just had this discussion with my oldest son, actually. And my response is that Menelem, this is the problem with writing really powerful characters. And I think it's something that every fantasy author has to deal with. You can only make your character too powerful before they bump up against the villain. And how they respond to that, I think, is telling about the character. I can think of a couple of fantasy characters who kind of brush against that. One could argue that Gandalf does throughout the course of the Lord of the Rings. He's intensely powerful, but as a response to that, he's also limited by the Valar for what he can and can't do in Middle-earth. And he accepts those restrictions to the point of death, and then they upgrade him. But other fantasy characters, for example, Corwin, from the Chronicles of Amber, which is an oldie but a goodie that I encourage by Roger Zelazny that I encourage everybody to read. Great fiction, absolutely great fiction, and Zelazny handles that sort of issue in some really intriguing ways. Corwin of Amber is so egotistically driven that divinity would be he wouldn't pursue it as a matter of course. He would almost see it as redundant because of his level of power. And so Minolin, when presented with the possibility of rising to divinity, and this is just my conjecture at this point, because we haven't gotten there, and when we do, I may change. But I think Minolin sees his place properly as not taking his place amongst the gods, but acting as a kind of regulatory agent between gods and men in ways that the clergy cannot be. The clergy are by definition devoted to various divinities. They've already got a dog in the fight. From Minolin's perspective, the Magi are there to advocate for humanity in ways that the clergy cannot. You could almost call them secular, even though they do brush up against divinity and divine magic occasionally. But Minolin sees his role as a protector and advocate for humanity against the gods. And I think if offered divinity himself, he may well refuse it just on the basis that that would compromise his role as advocate by granting him too much power, as well as the limitations that gods have developed as they've developed. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Okay, Walt is next. Thank you, Steve Poppy.
Oh, thanks, guys. Terry, let me start out by saying I am a longtime fan, an old Trekkie, so I've been a fan since Spartacus.
Oh, thank you.
I've got, you talk about your relationship with your sons. I actually have 3 adult sons on the call tonight, so we're all huge fans.
Outstanding.
Question for you. First off, do you think we'll see any more of Ruderall and his father's relationship in the upcoming books?
Oh, good Lord, yes. Basically, the direction, and we'll see. Eventually, we will see Ruderall's backstory, which will include his initial encounter with Tyndall and Rondell. That's something that my youngest son and I are working on, but he's 18 and trying to get him to focus on anything that doesn't pour out of a screen is difficult. If you have 3 adult sons, I think you could.
I do. I have 5 adult sons, but only 3 of them are here tonight.
Oh,
so
good God.
I understand.
Didn't you have cable when you were younger?
No, I was too. I couldn't afford a TV. You have other things to do. So.
Okay. But no, that's an excellent question. And yes, Ruderall's problematic relationship with his father, and his mother's relationship with his father are all going to come to the fore. By the time you get through Martial Arcane, you'll see the beginnings of that. We won't really see a serious development of that until Ruderall is a little older, and probably around book 21 or so. I hate to stretch it out that long.
We'll be here.
There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen that's going to affect their relationship, starting in book 15, and occurring sporadically until about book 21.
Fantastic. Well, we'll be here for that, Terry. We'll be here.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. And my sympathies. That's a lot of boys to raise. That's any females in your household. I feel so sorry for.
There is one daughter. So. No. Do you mind if I have one follow up?
Sure.
I want to say that with my sons being scattered all over the country, we do get together a lot and laugh about things, and we all appreciated the Rickroll. So.
Well, thank you.
I think you can understand that. It was a very good inspiration.
At his junior prom in the middle of COVID, he rickrolled his entire class at prom and did it in a masterful way. And when he came home and told me that, I was like, yeah, I got to do that to my fans. Just cause.
It was a great moment. It was a great moment.
Nobody else has done it.
Shame.
Well, and I think I even noted that you apologized after the fact in the writing. So, or you didn't apologize, but you did say you felt bad about it. So.
Yeah, I did, and I took a little bit of crap from it just by the popular culture reference, but I figured anything that has Rick Astley and Elvis in it, I was. Book 13, Foot Wizard was a special one for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Terry.
Thank you, Walt.
Have a good one, Walt. Captain Spaz.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm one of the aforementioned heirs of House Walt. How's everyone tonight?
Ah, excellent. Welcome for House Walt.
So, you've thrown a lot of big words at us this evening. I kind of want to stray a little bit away from maybe the series itself and talk a little bit about you for a second. So you thrown a lot of big words at us, magnetic biology or something along those lines. I don't know. I went to school in Florida. But what is your what's your background as far as your education? Right? Did you do a lot of research into sort of physics or biochemistry or anything like that when you were writing the books, or did you kind of pull science fiction / fantasy writer thing where it's like it doesn't really exist, so I'm just going to make it up?
Okay, I'm not above that. I'll start off with that. As a matter of fact, one of the 3 signs I have hanging up in my office literally says "make some shit up." When I write myself into a corner, that's one of my go-tos is just make some shit up. But no, to get into my education and background a little bit, I attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill as a religious studies major. That was not by design. I graduated high school originally thinking, my junior year of high school, I was still thinking I wanted to be an engineer. I had always been scientifically focused. I was fascinated by space and technology. This was in the late 80s when the internet wasn't even a thing yet, and where computer technology was just getting started. I was in my junior year when the Challenger exploded, and that was a serious moment for me. As a matter of fact, I had called out sick from school that day, and as soon as I saw it, I actually drove back to high school and sat with the physics class in front of the TV and watched all that. In high school, I took things like AP Physics, AP Computer Science, and then realized that I can't do math. And so being an engineer, faded as a potential opportunity for me, and I opened up my AP Physics test scores. But I knew I wanted to go to college, not to get a degree, but to get an education, and that's when I activated my long-term backup plan, and probably my only plan, serious plan, which was to become a best-selling fantasy author, because why the hell not? You got to do something. So I eventually got to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, lovely school, and it's the oldest public funded university in the country, and it was cheap. North Carolina, one of its quirks is that there is a part of our Constitution that says that the state shall provide a public education, post-secondary education, as close to free as possible. So the UNC system has one of the lowest tuition rates on the East Coast, which was great. And UNC was a public Ivy League. It's right next door to Duke University, and kind of not too far away from NC State and North Carolina Central University. So there's a rich academic environment in the Triangle region where I grew up. And UNC is a beautiful campus, and it is absolutely packed full of co-eds, I guess you could say. Lots of lovely young women who attend there. So I originally attended UNC with the idea of being an English major, because UNC's got a great English department. Unfortunately, being an underclassman at UNC in the English department means that you get last pick of your classes, because upperclassmen get first pick in order to fulfill their requirements. So while I was sitting around waiting for the really cool composition classes to open up, I took some business writing classes and some minor writing classes, and tried to avoid the really dull and boring literature classes. But I had to take something, and so I started taking religious studies classes, because they were almost always open and had space in them. My junior year, I went in and talked with my academic advisor, who pointed out that I was 2 religious studies classes away from fulfilling the entire major for religious studies, so I switched my major. All of that being said, I was still hanging around. My work-study job was with the Office of Information Technologies. I did user service and worked on the very early internet. When I first encountered the World Wide Web, there were literally less than 300 websites in the world. I actually saw all of them. I'm one of the few people you probably have ever met that have visited the entire World Wide Web back in the day. But that was in the basement of the physics building. And while you're hanging around in the middle of the night answering stupid questions from users, and updating library projects and stuff like that, you hang out with a bunch of physicists who are sitting there staring into space and occasionally doing drugs and staring into space, working on the deeper questions of the universe. And so I had a lot of bull sessions with guys who were dealing with quantum physics and astrophysics, which had always fascinated and intrigued me, but I didn't have the math to really understand it. So I would get these guys to try to explain various parts to me as best they could in layman's terms, and was just absolutely fascinated by it. Now, at the same time, UNC and the Triangle in general is also a healthcare center. Not only is the world-famous Duke University medical center at Duke, which has absolutely huge research facilities, but UNC itself also has a tremendous amount of healthcare-oriented research. At various points while I was a student and just after I was a student, I did temp work at places like the Weinberger Cancer Research Institute. Probably at least half of the medical departments at UNC hospitals and Duke University. I worked everywhere from urology to neurology to OBGYN, which I had the very unfortunate instance when working as a secretary for the head of OBGYN, temporary secretary, of coming across my mother-in-law's file because she was a patient, and that's just not something any man should have to. My future mother-in-law at the time, actually, but yeah, that's not something any dude wants to face. But beyond that, I also worked in Research Triangle Park at various times for BASF. Did some freelance work for the Microelectronics Center of North Carolina. And so I basically soaked up a lot of the background science of both medicine and physics, a little computer science here and there, and I just drank it all in. And whenever I came across something intriguing, I kind of put it in a mental file of something that would make an interesting story or an interesting perspective on a story. And just kind of accumulated that kind of useless information in my head as long as I could until I started writing. Even if you go back to Spartacus, which someone mentioned earlier, I think your dad, there are elements in there that come from my work in RTP, and that where I would come across something that I would go, that's intriguing, and want to file it away and use it in the future. So and on top of that, I did study religious studies, and I've got a very fine appreciation for the cultural expressions of religion across human civilization and human culture. Religion fascinates me. I am in awe of the human ability to create and manifest religion as our means of making sense out of a universe that just doesn't make sense most of the time. A universe that we can never know everything about. And religion fills very important gaps in our understanding in ways that I think add to human culture and don't detract from it. That's not to say that there aren't some negative things about religion in general and some religions in particular, but it's a fascinating sort of thing. So that kind of gives you my general background, and any particular thing that I throw into one of my books, I can usually trace it back to either a paper I read or a lecture I attended. Oh, and on top of that, my wife, my lovely wife, was a biochemistry major. She was originally pre-med and then worked in a lab at Duke. It only blew up once while she was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was pregnant with my first son when the lab blew up. And,
oh, my goodness.
Every now and then, I suspect he's got superpowers or something from that, but we'll see. He's still young.
She related to Anastasia from. Did she get kicked out of college for blowing up her lab?
She wasn't kicked out. She was actually a paid employee, and she herself wasn't responsible for the lab explosion. But she was in the vicinity and pregnant, and she didn't work in the lab very much longer after that.
I was thinking of Anastasia from.
Yeah, actually, that did well. When you hang around chemistry nerds, they talk about blowing labs up all the time. It's like a thing for them, which I find intriguing. The other intriguing thing, I borrow a lot from my wife's experience because we've been together so long. We're going to be celebrating our I think 25th wedding anniversary this January.
Wow.
And we've been together over 30 years now, so we got a lot of history together. And one of the things that she did while she was in college was she worked for the North Carolina Chief Medical Examiner's Office, the morgue, the state morgue. And gosh, that was fun. And she actually won an award for that, which I'm very appreciative of. But she also gave me a lot of inside information about how to murder someone and hide their body successfully. Which
as an author, that's nice advice.
And that's why I don't let her cook. After the lab blew up and she quit working as a bench chemist, she went into clinical research, which Research Triangle Park is like the Silicon Valley of drug studies. There are more pharmaceutical research organizations in RTP than I think any other place on the world in the world. More PhDs devoted to biocide than any place else, and you can't throw a stick without hitting a MD PhD who's looking for a job around here. And so between my experience in RTP and her experience in the clinical research industry, which she has thankfully retired from at this point, just before COVID, I've got a lot of great background knowledge in things like genetics and drug interactions and things like that. So I've got a very large, very informal education and a lot of scientific stuff, as well as a lot of cultural stuff. So I hope that answered the question probably more exhaustively than anybody was looking
No,
for.
that was perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Captain Faz.
I had a follow up just from that. Obviously, with your experience and knowledge and your studies, on the scale of atheists, agnostics, higher being, personal faith, where do you fall on that? Yeah.
Oh, I can tell you very precisely. And this may sound weird or shocking to some people, but I am a neo-pagan polytheist. While I was doing all this religious study stuff and science stuff and all that, I was also deeply involved in studying mystical traditions, including things like Druidism and Wicca. I personally would consider myself a neo-Druid, but I have a very fine appreciation for polytheistic cultures, which is one reason why I wrote Calidor the way that I did. I kind of wanted to portray a fairly mature polytheistic medieval culture, which we don't have a lot of examples of because at a certain point monotheisms tend to take over. I think Hinduism is the only true polytheistic culture that really survived the either the imposition of monotheism in the Western world or the imposition of a kind of dogmatic belief system in East Asia. So where the gods become less important than basically Buddhism messed up polytheism in the East just the way that Judeo-Christianity messed it up in the West. So I was looking for a way of examining that element of that cultural element, which is why the clergy in Calidor are the way they are.
Yeah. I'm only an hour from Stonehenge, so if you're ever in the area.
Oh, dude, don't tempt me. That's a lifelong dream. I want to do Stonehenge. I want to do Anglesey. I want to do. I've got a whole list. I could spend a month in Wales alone. And just do a megalith.
Great size. Yeah.
That's coming. I warn you. There will be a point where I feel successful enough to go. I'm going to spend 3 months in Britain and just do Britain the
just
way
do
that.
the place. Yeah.
All right, who's next?
Next is Valeria, but I do want to squeeze in 2 quick fire questions if you're ready. All right.
Lay it on me.
So, are you going to be doing a book for the next generation of the Spellmonger's children, or even generations later?
That's a strong possibility. The problem with that is that it will probably be concurrent with about books 22 through 24, the way that I've got it plotted out. And in that case, I've got to figure out which kids and how. While I've got the kind of tentpole scenes for the series around that point, I'm not precisely sure exactly how things are going to evolve. But there will come a point where, yes, I will definitely be doing an examination of men's kids and how they deal with the world that he has built.
Okay. And then, will Min get close to the Vundel like he has the Elan?
Ooh. Not close. Just because again, the Vundel have factions, and once that kind of part of the world is exposed, you'll see why the factions that are closest to men are actually on the low side in terms of status. And he will come to have a greater appreciation and understanding of the bundle. But they are so alien to both the humanity and Alkaline that humanity and the Alkaline are more or less the same sort of creature to the bundle's perspective. His understanding, it's going to be tricky to play it out, but his understanding will come in part in opposition to some factions of the bundle, and how that plays out is going to be interesting. But yes, he's going to have a much better appreciation and understanding of the bundle.
Okay, so Valeria was next.
Hey Terry, DeMarcos, nice to meet you here, and long-time fan, first time kind of tuning in to be able to speak with you, so appreciate you taking the time to speak with everybody. And thank you for your just hard work ethic and crushing out books. So my first rhetorical questions: can you just take over Game of Thrones and finish those already? You should just tell them, you just say you probably do it better.
Didn't
And my comment on that is, I'm about to. I'm at the point in the series where I finally feel confident enough after 15 books to start considering myself a real fantasy writer.
God, best ones out there.
Indeed.
Well, thank you. I'm also at the point in the series where, while I love each and every one of the fans that has gravitated towards it, I want to kind of kick it up a notch and expose it to more people. And so, to that end, probably in November, I will be sending out a slew of press releases that touts the fact that I think the headline is something like indie fantasy writer gets tired of waiting for the next Game of Thrones books right there.
You know, hold on. Didn't Stephen King write someone else's series ending because he was tired of waiting for it and announced it to the fans?
Yeah, I mean, I believe so.
Give it a shot and see what happens.
If you want to see something really entertaining, there's actually a mutual interview that Stephen King and George R. R. Martin do to each other. It's hysterical because Martin talks about how he'll do 3 chapters in 6 months and feel that he's made a lot of progress in his book, whereas Stephen King, he's popping him out about as fast as I am in a lot of cases, and seeing their two different perspectives on their productivity is fascinating. I'm more than happy to keep up this pace as long as I can. This week this year was a little rough, just because I crammed in 4 books in 1 year. Not to mention the stuff that I'm working on that y'all haven't seen yet.
I mean, it's not mainstream, and I try to tell my friends it's not just quick, it's quality, and you're begging for the next one. And I didn't even dive down that question. It was definitely rhetorical in nature, but I appreciate the perspective and just pump out quality.
Don't forget, fantasy writing is a job as well as a vocation, and that's part of the job. It was weird when I made the transition from having a day job to not having a day job. At first, it was great. Because I could wake up anytime I wanted. I could wear pajamas all day and no one would say anything. I could eat what I wanted when I wanted, and no one would bitch at me but my wife. All those things are great until you realize that the days that you decide not to write, you're not self-employed, you're unemployed. In order to really produce quality work, you've got to treat it like a job. And while part of that job is promotion and fan interaction and all that, the largest part of that job is sitting your ass in front of the screen and banging on the keyboard like you're going to get fired at the end of the week. And you're only as good as your next book. There's a lot of pressure, but there's also a lot of freedom. And one thing that I've tried very hard to do, and you know, this is a little tangential to your question, but one thing I've tried very hard to do is not write the same book over and over again. That's important to me. That I want each book to be entertaining in its own right, but I also want it to be fundamentally different from the previous ones and the ones that come in the future. And honestly, there's no good reason why you shouldn't be able to do that as an author. I enjoyed the Hardy Boys books as much as anybody as a kid, but they're essentially all the same book. You know, chapter 8 is all
Encyclopedia Brown as well.
You know, exactly. I mean, they're
or just anything Disney puts out these days with some sort of sellable merchandise post back in a cute little animal within the movie. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and to that point, I put plenty of cute little animals in my books.
That's why they sell, of course.
Yeah, well, that's less about current sales and more about future development of.
I want a war llama.
You may well get a war llama.
Yeah.
So, did you have another question, Valera?
I did. A real question is sort of with the new developments in the book. How much more character development are you going to see out of Manalian? I really see him as like a mini-me, but he's 5, right? So there's maybe not that many interesting things to say about him, but he's also, you know, the heir to Sevendor, and his character development, especially his dad is mad half the time, is going to be really interesting. And then the second part, just sort of as the tangent to that, is the new technology coming into play. Right? We've seen new magics that work on behalf of men, but there's also sort of this dark side of too much technology in our own world. So just really curious about you know, how Polonius culture is the only culture of humanity we've seen outside of the duchies, and whether or not you know, the introduction of hip hop is going to have some sort of play on the world of, you know what I mean, the world of Calidor, in terms of just new ideas and things that have come up in the past. If that's been given any help.
Yeah, I actually have given a lot of thought to that, and it's something that I'm treating very carefully. As to your first question, yeah, that men's kids and their development as characters is starting to proceed as they age into an interesting portion of their life. And in the future, we will see his other children that we haven't met yet. They will also pop up and be interesting in their own way. As far as the technological and cultural influences, the short answer is yes. They will have an effect on how things develop in the duchies and Calidor overall. But the effects are not going to be as predictable as you might think. Just because the way our as I discussed before, the way our technology evolved and developed in a world without magic, or at least without blatant magic, is going to be very different from how they evolve on Calidor, because the situations are just very, very different. And so the goal is to tell an interesting story about how technology can inform a world and affect it, but that, you know, technology and magic are kind of two sides of the same coin, in the sense that they can provide revolutionary moments, but they also produce a lot of consequences. And just as we will see with the of portal technology and things like giant hawks, a lot of these things are going to play a role in the further and future development of Calidor society that are going to be unanticipated and unexpected, and will have consequences to that. The biggest being, honestly, if I would have to put my finger on it, I would say it's not the mirror array, it's not the portal technology, but the agricultural laws. I probably have the biggest long-term effect, just because once you take agriculture from being a subsistence level community endeavor, and you reduce the number of people it takes to produce an acre of grain, that has profound ramifications for your society, regardless of how you accomplish it. And that will be a major factor going forward.
Okay. So next is Captain Baroque. Hello?
I was muted.
There we go.
Hi, thanks.
It happens all the time, trust me.
Sorry, what was that?
It happens all the time, trust me.
Yeah. So I have two questions that are kind of mainly real world situated. One is, do you think there's going to be more visual symbolism that's going to be added to the Spellmonger universe? Because like in the three main fandoms that I'm in are Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and Spellmonger. And I have a Star Wars tattoo. I desperately want to get a Lord of the Rings tattoo, but there isn't really much by way of visual symbolism from Spellmonger yet that's easily recognizable. There is the snowflake.
And we've got the jagged spiral rune of the Elnarsi. But yes, I see your point. I mean, you can get. I've introduced visual elements. For example, the sword and the rose for Castal, and the anchor and antlers for Alshar. The other duchies have their kind of national heraldry as well. But your point is well taken, I'm working to. I mean, there's a lot that I haven't like thrust upon y'all yet. Like, for example, I commissioned a friend of mine to develop the Gravani written language.
Oh, I do like that.
And so I've got an entire file of how that works. There are. The problem with a world as broad as I've built on Calidor is that choosing a particular symbol to be just like incredibly meaningful is difficult. Harry Potter kind of played around with this with the Deathly Hallows stuff. I always thought that was kind of low bar for Rowling, and thought she could have developed that a little more into something a little more sophisticated. There's the three mage stars, which have been a motif that's increasing in importance, especially considering Millen and Alia's connection with the three stars in the north. But yeah, your point's well taken. And to be honest, I don't have any tattoos at this point. But the one tattoo that I'm seriously considering, and my wife has so far been able to talk me out of, but after 15 books, I think I deserve it. If I had to get a tattoo myself, I think it would probably be the dragon from Bilbo's map from The Hobbit.
Ooh.
Yeah. I've always. Tolkien just had a very elegant hand when it came to doing that. And
He did.
That's something that's simple. And anybody who's familiar with the work would recognize it instantly, and everybody else would think it's just a dragon.
Okay.
And
So
that
he drew that himself.
Yeah, he did. Oh God, he did a tremendous amount of artwork in connection with the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, mostly watercolor, but he also did a lot of sketches. And I've actually got probably a folio worth of sketches that I've done with Spellmonger. Ironically, most of it castles. Even the castles I've mentioned, I've drawn out and come up with detailed floor plans and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But your point's well taken. And as Minolin gets closer to book 20, which will be an important milestone book, there will be the establishment of kind of a central symbol that will go beyond both the snowflake of Sevendor and the hammer and mountain of Vanador, and come to symbolize Minolin on his own. Although the snowflake is a powerful one, especially since he, created one from his head, and keeps it in the basement. So, keep that in mind. But I have had fans who have gotten tattoos of things from the books, which freaks me out. That someone would take a symbol from one of my little books and stitched it into their skin. But I've actually used a couple of the things that they've done and incorporated them into the books, like the Ketta's lily, the flower that Bannermore discovers, the hallucinogenic one. That actually came up from a fan's tattoo that she showed me and was very proud of, and I'm like, I can use that. But I will continue to work on developing more symbolic iconography for you to brand your own skin.
I'm excited for it.
All right.
My other question was, when/if you ever finish with the Spellmonger universe and just expanding it more and more and more, do you think there's anything after that for writing a completely new universe?
Maybe. I have written other stuff. If you're of a pornographic mind, you can check out Bad Penny, which is the one of the other novels that is available on Kindle. It is, this is a little weird, but it's the main character, the main hero, is a time-traveling serial rapist on a quest to save humanity. Which it's just as weird as it sounds, but it plays around with time travel in some intriguing ways. And yes, it's openly pornographic. And I've actually written the 2 sequels to it, and will publish them when I get a freaking chance. And then you may not be aware, but I've also written sequels to a Golden Age sci-fi writer, H.B. Piper. He wrote, among other things, the Little Fuzzy series, and the Gunpowder God series, Paratime, I believe it's called. But he also wrote a lovely little novel of revenge that was serialized, I believe, in Amazing Stories, called, oh God, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. Space Viking, that's what it was. Space Viking was a great novel from the golden age of sci-fi. I loved it, and so I wrote 2 sequels to it, and I'm working on the 3rd, slowly but surely. And that is another world, again, that I borrowed, but I really enjoy, and you'll find some common elements between certain sections of Spellmonger and my Space Viking sequels. But wait, there's more. The other thing that I invested a lot of time in before Spellmonger became a success, believe it or not, was some fan fiction. And I'm not ashamed of saying that. At the time, I was dealing with writer's block and the fact that no one wanted to publish any of my stuff. And so I started writing in the Firefly series. If some of you are Firefly fans.
Yep.
I thought it was one of the most brilliant pieces of television I'd ever seen. Great cast, great characters, well written, brilliantly written in places. And I got really into Firefly for a while and ended up writing 2.5 fan novels. The first being Kaylee's Lament, the second being The Treasure of Li Fong Wu, and the third, as of yet unfinished novel, was called Unfinished Business. And you can find all of those at fireflyfans.net, and my handle over there is Screw the Alliance. Kaylee's Lament was actually a great book from the sense that I wrote it all in 1 month. I did 1 chapter a day, just getting the instant feedback from the fans on it was amazing and helped develop me as a writer. And then Treasure of Li Fang Wu, I believe, is 90 chapters. It's the longest book I've ever written. I play heavily with the East Asian influences of Firefly, specifically Chinese and more specifically Taoists, the Taoist portions of Chinese culture, and explore that. And of course, right in the middle of that, the Serenity movie came out and not only fueled my interest in finishing the book, but changed how I finished the book. It's truly one of the. It was an instance of me learning on the job while I was writing something that I was deeply committed to. And it's one of my favorite pieces of literature that I've written, just from the perspective that I got to experiment an awful lot and learn so much from that by the time I got around to writing War Mage, I felt I was a much better writer. But you can get all 3 of those books for free at fireflyfans.net, fff.net, and look up Screw the Alliance. It's still very popular, and I have many fans who have kind of glommed onto me from that. So
you got to have Midland meet River.
Yeah.
That would be a trip. It would.
So, 2 things before we move on to Toaster. So, as far as iconography, I would turn to the heraldry. Like, I still am right there with the apple with a worm and half a bite.
Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go. Lorgus,
Yeah.
you can't get better than that.
I love Lorgus, so yes.
Little inspired on my part, if I do say so myself.
And then secondly, we did borrow your Space Viking. We have a channel devoted to the Space Viking, and when we were doing the Secret Stasi order, we had riddles on where to join, and we used emojis, and we hit it in the Space Viking channel, asking if there was news.
Oh, great. I was not aware of that. I will check that out. And
We have changed the riddle since then, but that was
the
it was the whole
Space
thing.
Viking book. When I feel that I can, like, take a month or 2 and take a deep breath and don't have a pressing Spellmonger deadline falling on my head, I do want to finish that out because it's got a climactic 3rd book, and I certainly want to give it its due.
Okay. Well, it's just a small channel here, but people have asked about it and whatnot. So, Toaster, you're next. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Hey, I changed microphones, so I hope I'm still coming through okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yes, you are.
Good. Okay, so I had kind of an interesting question come to mind, and it may be one that you can't really touch on much, so I do apologize. But I wanted to ask you, what kind of things did you consider? Like, what did you have in mind whenever Minolin and Lelastian were visiting Shal the Yith, and they had all these new minds put into their heads? Like, how did you make the choices that you did for those specific minds for each of those individuals?
Wow. That's a big and deep question, and
yeah,
very well taken. That said, I had a very specific goal in mind for each new character, each new memory that I introduced. And in some cases, like Andrew's, it was I wanted to inject a kind of Captain Kirkish adventure.
I love Andrew's, by the way.
Yeah, Andrew's is great. And then my Englishmen, no offense to my Brits, but especially in the 1920s and 1930s, that was such a fascinating time in British culture, and putting that so hideously depressing example of them in there. It gave me some room to explore. Some of them were kind of surprises to me. Umek, for example.
Mm.
I honestly didn't know when I started that chapter what kind of character would fall out, and it's a testament to Jameson's Irish whiskey that I was able to come up with the right kind of character for that. And then yeah, when I get to the monster at the end, that was always going to be in there.
Oh yeah.
I knew that from the beginning, but writing it was a challenge. I went back and reviewed a lot of Lovecraft and a lot of Clark Ashton Smith for the right tone for that, and I had to be in a really, really twisted state of mind to be able to carry that out. I think my wife was genuinely worried about me at the time. Because, I was dealing with all these profound cosmic issues and existential problems, and where life itself is an aberration in the universe, and
Yeah, there's so much futility in it all.
right. Yeah, it just got really deep, and I tried to channel both Lovecraft and Douglas Adams a little bit, and writing that all out. And then other characters were there more as observers for the events that happened, but because of that, they also developed characters of their own that and which is one of the main inspirations for writing Mad Mage is I wanted to explore the depths of each one of those memories, the character memories, in a way that demonstrated they did profoundly affect Menelin, each and every one of them in their way, but didn't occlude the entire story, the entire narrative. That's why I spun it off into a novella and did it in journal form. And then with each new passage in the journal, I literally rolled a die to see which character would pop up. So it's completely.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and sometimes I regretted having that particular character faced with that particular situation, but it worked out. It was an experiment, but I think it was a successful experiment. That doesn't mean I'm going to repeat it, but it was artistically gratifying and it had the predictable result, which is about 5 to 10% of my readers absolutely hated it, and I figured that would be the threshold. If more than 10% hated it, I'd failed. But if it stuck in the 5 to 10%, this isn't the Menelin I signed up for. This is too short, or whatever their grievance was. I was looking for that kind of rejection of the experiment to show that the experiment was a success. So
Wow.
it was a challenge. It really was, and I think it took the series in a direction that most other fantasy writers probably wouldn't have indulged in, simply because it was too difficult. And I hate to say that, but one thing that you learn when you get into a genre is that there are the tropes that everybody expects you to do. There are the tropes that if you depart from them, you get crap, you get blowback from your readership. And I wanted to see how close to the edge I could skate before people started to object. And I think I struck a good balance in Mad Mage. I'm proud of that, and the fact that I wrote that one in essentially just about a month's time.
Most of the complaints I heard, though, Terry, were, and a couple people got really loud about it, was that it was a spoiler for Martial Arcane. Oh, gee, I don't need to read Martial Arcane. I already know everything that's going to happen. We know that's not true.
Oh, sure they do.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly. and that was part of the design. I wanted to and this is the thing. When I go from one book to another and they overlap like that, like I did with Court Wizard and Enchanter,
Yes.
that's by design. Part of it is to show different perspectives on the character and the plot. But part of it is to take some risks with the series, to take it in places that you weren't expecting, because it's got to be fresh. I mean, again, I love the Hardy Boys, but after reading 6 or 7 of them, you pretty much know what's going to happen in each one after that.
Well, the thing is, you're only seeing bits and pieces from a fragmented mind of an insane person. You don't know if any part of Mad Mage is exactly what the other people are seeing at the same time.
Yeah, he even says he's
right.
Minolin says he's leaving stuff out because it gets accounted for elsewhere. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and part of that was to keep there from being overt spoilers and just tease some of the things, like with Azar, for example. But part of it was to build up to a climax that was literally, planet shaking, but was not terribly expected by the reader until we got there. And to kind of instill a sense of dread in the reader about the outcome.
Well, that's exactly what I told them.
That's fair.
Okay, the raid was successful. What was the purpose of the raid? What was the mission? Who did they save? In fact, did they save anyone? Did all the mages come back? You don't know any of that from Mad Mage.
Right.
All you know is certain key characters came back, and that's all you know.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Well, speaking of characters, we've got Olmec the Green, I think was next. Thanks, Toaster.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's definitely
one of my favorites.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Olmec.
So, I'm curious, the first time reading through, hearing the Brotherhood of the Iris, I know I know you can't really give away everything here, but are they possibly like Calidor's surviving Freemasons?
Not Freemasons,
Okay.
but there are interesting parallels between the two.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, the Iris more than likely is an acronym. They can trace their lineage back to the colonial period, and their motivations and goals are not actually criminal in nature. They're a criminal organization because it's the most expedient way to do what they need to do.
Gotcha.
And they are based loosely on the Chinese triads, which I studied in college a fair amount.
Interesting.
Because the triads, in and of themselves, were not criminal organizations to begin with. Essentially, there's this thing in Chinese history where when one dynasty overcomes another, the losing dynasty frequently, or has frequently throughout history, went underground and become a criminal organization as a means of rebuilding their power. Now, it very rarely worked out that they would actually come back to power after doing that, but the triads are basically a collection of remnants of political groups that, or even religious groups that were thrust from power and found alternative means of maintaining what power that they did have in an effort to influence society. If you look at the origins of the mafia in Sicily, something very similar is there, and it's interesting because both of those things feature prominently in my Firefly novel Treasure of Li Fang Wu. Just to call that out there. I've always been intrigued by criminal organizations in general, and especially well-organized criminal organizations, and looking at their origins. The Brotherhood of the Rat, for example, that's a completely plausible but fairly mundane origin story for a criminal organization. Some of the most profound criminal organizations, arguably, have had much more esoteric foundations to them, and exploring that is a lot of fun. And the Iris is something along that line, but you'll have to wait to see just how I reveal that.
Okay, looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Also,
Anything else?
yes, I was curious. You know how it's basically the catchphrase of today's magi, in, in where we're at in Spellmonger of, this kind of thing hasn't been attempted since the Magocracy. Do we have any kind of precedent for during the Magocracy of, Minolin mentions like the things that you can do with divine magic, like, get a whole group of people chanting, believing the same thing. Do we have precedent of that happening in history with Erionite and divine magic to that scale?
Not with Erionite specifically. Usually, divine magic arises amongst the general population, not amongst the Magi. It is because my basic assumption is that every human being has some connection with the Magisphere, but only a small percentage of them have enough of a connection to be able to consciously control the energies involved. But when you're talking about the human subconscious, collective subconscious, you're talking about a low level of input, I guess you could say, that finds a kind of equilibrium of consensus about who and what the gods are. And at the very beginnings of the Magocracy, this was consciously steered by a collection of human magi and Alcalan in order to shape the future of the colony once it became clear that if we have a large number of people who start believing in Shiva, for example, things aren't going to look good for Calidor. And that's just one example. But you get back to the story of Noah, and while the Vundel might be happy with a worldwide flood, nobody else would. And that kind of creating and destroying demiurgic deity would be possible to manifest if humanity went that route. And so there was a conscious effort to steer them away from that into smaller, less powerful divinities from the subconscious level. And there's a whole backstory involved of how the Alcalan and the Magi kind of conspired to thrust upon humanity this kind of vague polytheism that kept the number of divine manifestations to a minimum and then retarded their power when they did manifest. Now, that being said, not everybody bought into this, and this will be explored at some future point. Not everybody bought into that, and some adherents to monotheistic faiths were unwilling to give them up. So you had two choices, or the Magi at the time, the proto-Magi, I guess you could say, at the time, presented the true believers of the monotheistic religions with two choices. You can either go back into hibernation and go back to the new frontiers, new horizons, and wait until we have a solution to this problem, or you can be exiled to a Jevelar. Not the one that we've experienced in Foot Wizard, but there is a second Jevelar within proximity to the Five Duchies, where the hardcore monotheists took voluntary exile to keep their collective subconscious from creating a divinity that could destroy the world. And at some point we will visit it.
That's very interesting. Looking forward to that.
I just wanted to do a courtesy check because we've been powering through for 3 hours. So I just wanted to make sure.
I'm not even halfway through the bottle yet.
Oh man, that's incredible. Okay, cool.
We just wanted to check on you though.
We wanted to check on your well-being.
But
you don't want to get trouble with Mrs. Spellmonger, for this call.
Yeah. She's fine. She slept late today, but and I already prepared dinner for the kids before I came up here. Let's do maybe three more questions, and then we'll call it a night. And I'll try to do
Fill
it.
in Chris Slacken if you're not halfway through the bottle yet, Terry.
I've been talking a lot. That's my only. If I was writing, I'd be more than halfway. But it's time for drink number 3. I think.
Okay. So we're gonna do Spartan, Connor, and Captain Spaz. If you all just limit to one question, and then we will wrap things up.
But did Skyfather Andrew not have a question? I'm sure I saw one.
He does have one waiting in the background because I know his mic is having some problems. But we could try to do that before Middleton leaves because I have a short one as well. But let's get the fans who don't get to see or talk to you very often, you know.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so thank you so much for this. It has been amazing to hear you actually answer questions. We've had a few of these now, and I've listened in on a couple and spoken in a few, and I think most of the big topic points you've answered. And I had a few questions. A couple of the guys make fun of me because I come in and out of the chat because I just get so excited about your material. But I also had my hand up several times with the questions they would ask. You've answered so thoroughly that it really kind of took away my question. But specifically on the YIF, I guess, is what I will ask about because I also like Alia quite a bit, and that question was asked by Palasa. But yes, so the YIF, are those distinct personalities complete in the sense that I know the story from the Mad Mage, he was able to see and act from their perspective, and I know that you've said in some of the works that sort of fades over time, but is it to the point, especially with, like you called it, the Beast, that he's got a legit mental illness, and that there'll need to be some sort of a mechanism to magically or otherwise intervene on those switches?
Good question. I'm particularly proud of stealing the YIF. First of all, that was not my creation. That was done, I believe, by Lovecraft. Introduced the race of the YIF. Although I took some liberties with the race when I imported it. But in terms of the memories involved, I would say that yeah, it's not just mental illness. We're dealing with aliens, and I state that in the most specific sense of the word. When you talk about the differences between the Alkaline and humanity, there are some profound differences. There's no doubt that their approach to many things is very, very different. Their how they interact with each other varies greatly between the Alkaline and humanity. But when you talk about it, they might as well be the same race when it comes to the bundle. And honestly, the bundle and humanity think more similarly than a truly alien species would, and especially species that arose during the very earliest parts of the universe. And my mythos, a time where magic was more prevalent, but was also less considered magic than just a variation on quantum physics.
I noticed it that way, I guess, because at this point you've tempered Middleton's soul by the god experiences. You've messed with his mind like in crazy alien ways, and his body has been worked on by the Vandal and the Handmaiden. So I mean, he's not really human anymore.
Well, it depends on how you define human. In some ways, he's even more human because faced with the inhumanity of those alien memories, he clings to his own humanity even more. and this is something that will become more apparent as we've gone on. I mean, it's been brought up quite rightly that Minlin started out as kind of this oversexed dweeb who had a very shallow perspective of the universe and his world. And quite rightly. I mean, part of my goal in the Spellmonger series has been to deconstruct what a wizard is. You know, and in some ways, this is Gandalf or Merlin's backstory. Merlin aged backwards. That was his shtick. Gandalf was incredibly powerful, but incredibly limited in how he was able to use those powers. And the variations on Gandalf, the other wizards, all failed in particular ways, whereas Gandalf didn't. But they were all thousands of years old and all had a complex backstory that Tolkien alludes to, but doesn't go into much detail about. One reason that I'm hesitant to watch Rings of Power is because I'm worried about how they're going to screw that up. But Spellmonger in general, I've constructed to show the development of the man who knows, the wizard, from being an oversexed lead to being in charge of things that he never expected or intended to be responsible for, and how he comes into a greater sense of wisdom because of his experiences and the challenges that he's faced.
And I guess you're going to have to address his control of these other entities, aliens, as you say, because
and lack of control.
And lack of control, yeah. So in the future, I guess, is it going to be a dominance thing by him, or is there going to be a split personality forever of the Minlin we know?
I would say it wouldn't be a split personality. He will slowly but surely reintegrate those elements of his memories into his main memory, but it's going to be a struggle, and that's part of the fun of the story, honestly. If he just woke up and felt better one day, you know, that wouldn't be much fun. As a matter of fact, I have toyed around with the idea of writing a novel where Minlin loses his memory entirely and has to regain it. But that would be difficult to write, and I would have to have the right moment in the plot for that to work. It would be an interesting exploration of the character, but it would also be, in a lot of ways, you know, shaking the Etch-a-Sketch and starting from scratch, and I don't want to do that. We are, as I've stated in the series in various ways, we are really nothing more than a collection of memories, and if you take that away from someone, you strip them of their personality. And I don't want to go that far. At least
well, didn't we do that with Alia?
We did kind of, and she's still recovering from that. But and what she has left, what she is now, is the result of a long and painful.
Whoa. And he's gone.
Uh-oh.
Well,
oh no.
There you go.
Oh no.
3 hours and.
No, he's he's back.
Yeah, I have no idea how that happened, but I'm back.
Welcome back.
Anyway, yeah, we did have that with Alia, and I want to avoid that same path with Minlin, because I've already done it with Alia.
Yeah, and each of the personalities so far that you've shown, and the depth that you've shown them, has been amazing. And they all have added elements to the story and solving the problems. Definitely illustrated like that the Yith put those specific ones in there for a reason, and that just makes us wonder if the same thing is true for my memory with names right now.
Lelastian.
Yes, thank you, Lelastian. Hers were all there for the same compelling reasons, or like her own unique reasons. So I appreciate that as a fan, the depth that you've done each of them. I was just wondering, like from a medical point of view, if like how he's handling that. I guess after reading Mad Mage, I mean, like he legit would be clinical at this point.
Okay, Oh, he is clinical. He's just hiding it really well. I've actually had friends with severe mental illness who anybody who casually encountered them would not suspect that they suffered from severe mental illness because they've gotten, as a coping mechanism, very good at concealing what's going on inside. And to a certain extent, Menelon is doing that as he's working through this. I think you'll get a greater sense of that as you read Martial Arcane. And those few of you who have, I think, would agree with me that he has to contend with the fact that he's got other people living in his head, and they're not real people; they're memories of people. Even at the end of Martial Arcane, we're not done with that. There will be more. Book 16 is already shaping up to be an intensely psychological book. So I very much appreciate that acknowledgement, actually.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Spartan.
Thank you, sir.
Connor is next to last, and our penultimate will be Captain Spaz. Or no, hang on. Yeah.
My question last minute, but Prince Tavard, when is he gonna be walking around Willard Hall or the capital of the kingdom, and rounds a corner and just catches Menelon's fist in the face? When's he just gonna get knocked out?
Interesting question, and that's actually as I'm starting to write book 16. If I had to have a theme of book 16, basically what I've set up is an untenable situation. Menelon is at odds with his future sovereign, and that does not bode well for the kingdom. It looks to be a shootout between the decrepit chivalry and the ascendant magi, and that, as we've seen, leads to civil war. And civil war is almost never good for any nation. And so there's going to have to be some mitigating factors. Either Tabard's going to have to go, or Menelon's going to have to go, or there's going to have to be a fundamental change in their relationship. And book 16 will explore that. I've already come up with a theme that encompasses that. Tabard will actually be a major player in book 16 because of what happens in Martial Arcane. I'm assuming you aren't one of my beta readers who've read it already. But let's just say Martial Arcane will be very gratifying in some ways for you because of the Tabard issue. But it doesn't end there. The problem with writing a villain, and I've written several across the course of the series, but you can't make them too bad, because a great villain is someone that the reader or viewer empathizes with in some way. If you're just a bad guy for the sake of being a bad guy, that's no fun. But all the great villains, from Darth Vader to Cersei Lannister, even Sauron, and Sauron to an extent, have elements that the reader can identify with and empathize with. And Tabard, to his credit, isn't an evil man. He's petulant, he's self-centered, he's self-involved, which basically puts him on par with pretty much every major monarch that the Middle Ages ever saw. But very few of them were truly evil, and I can certainly think of a couple of dramatic exceptions. From Menelon's point of view, Tabard is an obstacle that needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with one way or the other. But there's more than one way to deal with him. And Menelon, at his current place is starting to realize that just defeating Tabard doesn't fix the Tabard problem. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like dealing with the current situation with Russia and Putin. Putin is clearly a bad guy. But there are plenty of people who empathize with Putin because of the situation that he has faced at the end of the Russian Empire, for all practical purposes. He's facing the collapse of his entire nation, and there's really no real way out. That doesn't mean he's not going to fight for what he believes in, and in some ways, it's possible to look at that as a noble endeavor, even if you disagree with his conclusions and his goals. That Tabard is not Putin. He's being handed a kingdom he hasn't earned.
Tabard's Liz Truss.
Right.
We've got a new prime minister.
I mean, there are a lot of great parallels. I don't disagree.
God. From Game of Thrones.
The difference is that Tabard feels entitled to it, and that's what really gets me, is the fact that Tabard's sense of entitlement, and thinking that he is a representative of the natural order and not a historical hiccup that made heavy cavalry, for a couple of brief 100 years, the deciding factor in politics. So basically, book 16, if I had to give it a theme, would be the wizard as mentor, and I will leave it at that.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connor. All right, Captain Spaz.
Right on. Well, I'm going to end this thing out. I have a question, kind of circling back to what we talked about earlier and tying it into the divinities of Kalidor. So you made mention earlier to religion playing an important part in our world, right? Faith has played a very important role in how humans attempt to understand the universe around us. And if we tie that into technology, then one could argue that over the course of human history, the more science, the more technology that we advance in, the less faith, I guess, that we devote into certain divinities. Tying that into the Spellmonger, do you foresee maybe an issue that comes up with, if humans do take on more of the technology and more of the science and more of the understanding of the universe that the colonizers had, do they start putting less and less faith in the divinities that they have, and does that affect the divinities in some sort of unchangeable way?
Interesting question, and I won't answer it thusly. I don't see a straight up dichotomy between faith and reason. For the simple fact that the people who essentially invented reason and science were the ancient Greeks, who were madly devoted to their divinities. And I think that the modern dichotomy that we've constructed between faith and science and reason is the result of, I would say, the Western Europe's steadfast support of the Catholic Church and its dogma to the exclusion of all else, and science and reason and the Enlightenment being a reaction to that. I think under slightly different circumstances, we could have very well seen reason and faith evolve in a very different way. And I think this is borne out by the fact that there are intensely intelligent and brilliant minds within the Indian subcontinent who are both brilliant scientists and completely devoted to their religion. We can set up a dichotomy between faith and reason, but there's no inherent reason why they should be at odds with each other. It's quite possible for science to inform religion, and it's extremely possible for religion to influence especially the ethics and morals of science as it progresses. And in point of fact, it has. As much as Western civilization has adhered to a modern secular perspective, the fundamental human rights and fundamental moral and ethical structures that secular society, secular science, and reason has adhered to, even beyond in some cases what Christianity and Judaism have proposed and have given us a foundation. It comes directly from the Western mystical traditions and Western religious traditions. Slavery being an excellent case in point. Slavery was both justified and condemned by Western religion long before we had the rise of the empirical Enlightenment society.
Masters was one of the worst ones.
What was that?
Oh, it's just that biblical reference to the masters been held back emancipation for a long time.
Excellent point. Excellent point. I think that the dichotomy that arose, especially in the late 19th century and early 20th century, between scientific and secular modernity and archaic superstitious religion, it is really a construct of Western society and not a human universe. Because I think in other cultures outside of Western Europe, the Western European civilization, we've seen the ability to integrate, at least to a certain extent, what we consider faith and reason in a more cohesive whole. I don't think it's necessarily superior. I think there's a certain cultural energy that you get in the West from putting science and religion in two different camps and throwing them at each other to see what comes out. And I think we've overall prospered from doing that. But there's no denying that there has been, since the age of the Enlightenment, a steady decrease in religiosity in general. I mean, Europe's full of churches that are empty, beautiful churches that are empty. Whereas in the United States, we have crappy churches that are packed full of people who are generally ignorant of science and reason. There's a lot of different ways that can play out. And I think in the Spellmonger universe, pardon me, we're dealing with a civilization that has direct proof of divinity from a certain perspective, but it's not disproved or contested by reason and science. Pardon me. I think in a lot of ways the Magi represent a secular intelligentsia that has managed to cling on to some fundamental scientific, quote quotes, truths about the universe that they can directly observe. Um, Things like the microcosm of bacteria, not something that you know just anybody can see. But if you have mage sight, you can magnify things to the point where you can see the microscopic world. The astrophysical universe, while it's not as easy to see as the microscopic universe with mage sight, the Magi have the ability to directly experience things that the common person cannot, through the office of magic. But that's very difficult to explain to your average peasant or artisan, because they can't experience it themselves. So in a way, they're advocates of a secular and empirical perspective on the universe, that where divinity doesn't play a huge role, but they are just as unable to communicate the nuances of that to the rest of humanity as the clergy are able to communicate the importance of divinity to the rest of humanity, which is one reason why I've set up the Magi as this kind of alternative to the clergy, to the religious response. But that being said, as it has been said in the past, there are no atheists in foxholes. When you take an individual or a society and put them through an extreme situation, it's natural. It would be unnatural if they did not appeal to mysticism and
I
religion.
can tell you that's true.
100% true.
And that's a truth I'm trying to reflect in the Spellmonger series, in a subtle way and over a long course of books, because it's not something I think that you can. There's a lot of nuance there, and there's a lot of perspective that needs to be explored for it to be truly understood. It's not something that can be related in a pithy comment or an equation. It's something that needs to be experienced from multiple perspectives. But it's an important part and an important element of the series, because that's one of the questions as I deconstruct the wizard as a trope. It's kind of like, and anyone who has read Mad Mage might appreciate this. It's kind of like the main character of The Tempest. Someone remind me of his name, because I'm going to can't remember it.
Oh, Shakespeare Tempest? Crap.
Yeah, Shakespeare's Tempest. Prospero.
Yeah.
Prospero. Minlin is like Prospero in reverse. Prospero, Shakespeare wrote him to be one of the final wizards of the old age, faced with the rise of the empirical, humanistic, secular age of the future. And he's a reaction, in a lot of ways, the same way that Don Quixote was a reaction to the fall of the chivalrous order and the rise of the more empirical, secular order that eschewed things like nobility and knighthood, and from his perspective lost a lot. Prospero is essentially looking at the same thing. The mystery of the modern age is fading, and Prospero is an adherent of the old way, and the more mystical way, and he is trying to regain his position, partially because he wants to reassert that old way, the more mystical way. And I think those two characters and those two stories are important representatives of Western literature, but they're not the only ways that you can approach it. Prospero was a wizard. He did all the wizardly things that everybody expected an evil wizard to do back in the Middle Ages. But he's a wizard at the end of his line, basically. The next iteration of this is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where science fiction suddenly rises, and it's the evil doctor and researcher, not the evil wizard, who becomes the main villain of the story. And so with Menelin and the Spellmonger series, I'm trying to look at the role of the wizard not just as a reaction against empiricism, but or a reaction against mysticism, but someone who's attempting to bridge the gap between the two, who stands as an advocate of humanity and a proponent of humanism in its broadest sense, but also someone who can approach divinity for its usefulness and encourage it even. For example, Menelin's relations with Ishi and Drigo, and use religiosity and the divine force to pursue his own ends, which is very contrary to the traditional impulse of a clerical figure. A priest wants to promote a divinity. Menelin wants to promote a divinity who's going to actually help humanity, and that seems a little selfish from a clerical perspective, or an ecclesiastic perspective. But that's the role of the wizard in this world, is to, I've frequently said that magic intervenes where religion fails, and that's kind of the part of his developing role, is finding a place between God and man that emphasizes the welfare of humanity, not the welfare of divinity. So, I hope that wasn't too meandering in answer to your question.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. It provided a lot of clarification on how, I guess, how the mages interact and how they, I guess you could say, promote those abilities. And to clarify, the faith.
Well, excellent.
Yeah. The faith that.
And don't forget that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, and it's interesting because this kind of dovetails with, believe it or not, the release of Shadow Heist coming up is one of the things that Gatina deals with. Is, as she approaches, it recognizes that there's a larger universe out there, and she is in an ecclesiastical institution that purports to have at least some answers, but not nearly enough, and not the ones she's looking for, and not the ones that satisfy her at all. She genuinely strives to contend with this whole question, and find her place in relation to both her world and the world of the gods, and their role. That's something that I think everybody struggles with starting in adolescence, which is why, at least in the Christian church, we have all those catechisms and classes right around the times of adolescence, to try to give us some answer to those questions. And Gatina is in a monastery that's been around for hundreds of years, and where they're literally talking about the stars in the sky, and millions and billions of years of stellar evolution and things like that. And it's just a sense of perspective that she has a hard time wrapping her mind around. But it's also something that I think she appreciates the mystery and the majesty of what she doesn't know, and comes to appreciate that in a way that she she can insert some of that into her personal life as she develops from a child to an adult. I hope at least some of those things get reflected and come up from the exploration of religion and Shadow Heist. It's not the main focus of the novel, but it's mentioned often enough and is important enough because of the setting, so that I think some people will take something from it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So as we're wrapping up here, we have 2 more rapid fire ones for you, and then we'll be done. So, first of all, we'll go to Ender B, aka Andrew, who's in here with us, but his mic is still kind of a struggle. Besides Techomancer, are there any new specialized magi that will be introduced in the next few books?
Yes. I don't want to get into it specifically
Understandable.
because that's going to spoil some things. But there will be a book called The Urge at some point in the future that deals specifically with the entire question of divinity and divine magic. There are also other... don't forget that the Five Duchies isn't the only place where magic has evolved on Caliber, and as Menelin goes out and explores different cultures that have been presented with the same issues that the Five Duchies have, they found different answers, and so their expressions of magic are going to be different. And as we come to each of those, there will be some, in some cases, pretty wild expressions of magic as we move forward.
Okay. And then the last one, this is a completely up to you kind of thing. We have spitballed this idea that we would like to do a Spellmonger D&D session and broadcast it for the fans. Would you, if we had organized this, participate as one of the players for our publicity day? And we could possibly do something to like have a lottery of fans to join in as one of those players.
Yes, actually. As a matter of fact, I am working on the final bits of the Battlefield Press release of the Spellmonger adaptation. And hell yeah, believe me, I've done 17-hour gaming stints before, so I'm completely down with that. And as things develop and move forward, as a matter of fact, I'm also working on an Ecovettery adventure in that very thing. So that would be cool.
Perfect.
I'm totally open to it.
Honestly, we had this discussion before, and more recently I've been thinking of doing something along those lines if we did as a Spellmonger's trial, and just let people kind of run through one.
Oh, I like that idea. I do.
Yeah. But we'll keep you in mind, and we'll let you know as we come up with that. So thank you for coming out today.
Well, thank you. Thank everybody for who asked the question, or at least showed up and listened to me talk. And now I have to pee really, really bad.
Terry, see you in Baltimore.
All right, see everybody in Baltimore, and thank you so much, people. I appreciate you reading my stuff. I do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for publishing.
Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you all for coming out.